Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Commercial Aviation Work Group meeting. Work group members and members of the public, please be sure to sign in on the appropriate signage sheets. There's one sheet for members and another for the public. For members of the public in person, please remain seated and silent throughout the meeting and silence your phone. There will be an opportunity for public comment from 2 p.m. to 2:30 p.m., and I will alternate between in-person and online. Work group members, please speak clearly and loudly throughout the meeting so those in person and online can hear you. For the public online, please keep your microphone and video off throughout the meeting unless you are called on during public comment. Hybrid meetings can come with unique challenges, so I do appreciate everyone's cooperation and patience if any technical difficulties arise. Work group members online, please put your video on and microphone on mute unless you are speaking during the meeting. If you have a comment or question during the meeting, please speak freely during the meeting or use the hand raise button. And as a reminder, members of the public will be muted unless you're called on during public comment, in which I will unmute you to speak. Otherwise, please be respectful during the meeting. And for those in person, the emergency exit is located in the front and the back of the rooms as indicated by the exit sign. Now I will pass it to Ed.
All right, good morning, everybody. Evan Murphy, I'm the chair of the Commercial Aviation Group. First, since we're a hybrid meeting, we've got multiple members attending online, but we cannot see the member in the room, cannot see the members who are attending online. So I want to encourage you, if you want to speak, to either just speak up or raise a hand. I think Christina can see folks attending online. So usually we can see the online folks, but today we can't. I want to make sure, as we call the meeting order, we have a quorum. So let's go around and do introductions.
Recording in progress.
And then we'll make sure we have a quorum. So let's start to my left.
Okay, does this work? Yes. Hi, I'm Rob Hodgman, Airport Director, Yak Mayor Terminal.
Morning.
I'm Buck Taft, the director from the Tri-Cities Airport, Pasco, Washington.
Alan Adolph, I'm the Regional Transportation Manager for the Yakima Valley Conference of Governments. We're the NPO, R2PO for the Yakima County region. And non-affiliated.
Good morning.
Gary Word, I'm a citizen representative of Eastern Washington on KF.
All right, good morning. And then online, you introduce yourselves. I guess I'll call on you, people I know that are there, and we'll see if anyone else pops up. So, Mr. Dunham.
Chris Dunham, Citizens Representative, Western Washington.
All right, Lee.
Good morning, Allie Lee, Citizen Representative.
All right, Ms. Badiola.
Good morning, Maria Batiola, Statewide Environmental Organization Representative for Front and Centered.
And Mr. Reardon.
Yeah, Charlie Reardon. Good morning, everybody. Kent, Washington.
Right. And so we have, is there anybody else online that I didn't call on that may have logged on since I took, made a list? Okay, hearing nobody. Under our new policy for that members continue to serve even after their appointed term is expired unless until they're replaced or reappointed. I recognize that we have 7 voting members in attendance, 3 in person and 4 online, and that's a quorum of our 13 current member just barely membership. So we have a quorum, great. Agenda. I want to review the agenda quickly from 10 to 10:30. Actually, I understand the Mayor Union Gap wanted to give a introduction. So now that we have a quorum and we're officially in order, I want to call Mayor Union Gap. Where do you want me?
Yeah, in the front, so the cameras. Oh, in the front, please.
So,
The hours. Yeah, right.
yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you here in the city of Union Gap and welcome to our city hall and campus. City hall contains our executive side and also the police department. Our library and senior center just opened a year ago, and the fire department's right across the street. So we have things pretty much contained in one area. I always hated to have the police department or a fire department off someplace else. You lose track of who's doing what. Nobody knows each other. So we're glad we got this thing built. This worked out great. Again, we're glad to have you. We're interested in the airport. We're working on our beltway to get freight access better from the lower valley, et cetera, into the airport. So we look at ourselves as a partner with the airport and glad to have it. Thank you for being here. And I'll let you get on to your meeting.
Well, thank you very much for having us in this facility. It's like great for our meeting. You need to find somewhere we could have people, both citizens and members of the group here remotely as well as in person. Great, so thank you.
Yeah, we don't allow citizens in. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. All right. So today's agenda, we have this first half an hour for housekeeping. Work through that. From 10:30 to 11, we have, since the last meeting, received RFQs. In response to our RFQ, we received proposals for consultants to work with the work group. We need to appoint a committee to review those and to interview the submissions. So we'll do that in that block of time. From 11 to 11:30, we have an end to discuss our work group annual report. In the circulated agenda, we have at 11:30 a brief discussion about a discussion regarding JBLN as the joint use airport. Obviously, we're not going to have that discussion in 2 minutes. But what I actually going to propose is that we roll that discussion forward to the around 2:30 block for set next meeting and adjourn to talk about topics that at future meetings together. And this one kind of got set aside with a separate block of time. I think we should probably have that discussion later today. We can we decide that we come to it. Then we have lunch, and then at 12:30 we have a presentation from Mr. Hodgman on the Yakima Airport and distributed air service. From 1:30 to 2, Mr. Work, the group is going to present on passenger rail service and possibilities for passenger rail connections with aviation. We have public comment from 2 to 2:30, and then, as I mentioned, we have a discussion of our next meeting topics and adjournment. And then from 3 to 4, Mr. Hodgman is going to host some a tour of the Yakima Airport tower. So,
Yeah, so just a comment.
Just to mention, there's coffee, tea over here, courtesy of the city of Union Gap. There's also donuts over here. So don't feel bad about helping yourself because I don't want to have to take them home. So thank you.
At this point would be a good point to mention, as well as we do at each meeting, the members of the work group are serving in it's essentially citizen members or representatives of an individual group, depending on what seat they're appointed to, and views expressed by them are not attributable to their employers in other capacities or any other. I'm here on leave for my team job. All right. As I mentioned, the next item in this part of the agenda is the status of appointments and non-voting member invitations. As I mentioned, we now have under the new policy 13 participating members. I don't believe we have anyone newly appointed who isn't here today. I went and looked at the list this morning on the state's website, and I didn't see any names that I didn't recognize. So, as far as non-voting member invitations, I don't think we have any updates on that either.
I think we probably should think about, asking some more non-voting members. The legislation requires that we do so. I think we invited someone for every position, but, some folks did not respond, and there were some that actually declined, and some accepted. Isn't that your understanding, Christina? Yeah, so we probably should follow up with those vacant non-voting positions and figure out whether to invite a specific individual or contact those organizations and ask them to nominate someone from their organization. Because, at least for me personally, I don't know individuals in those organizations that I could recommend, because I just don't know them. So, but we could send an invitation specifically to certain organizations and ask them to nominate some. Something to follow up on between now and our next meeting, I think.
Great. Does anyone online have any thoughts about that? Hearing nobody. Okay. We at the last meeting discussed charter amendments. That language was plugged into our existing charter between the last meeting and now. The language added, the language that's been added discusses the new bill this year, ESSB 1561, and also writes into the charter the new serve until you are replaced or resign language summarized. Did everyone have a chance to review the new charter, the updated charter with the new language in it? See if you can also morning, Mr. Crawford.
That's Speaker.
Chair.
Yes.
I posted your draft on Google Docs, so everybody can go online and actually insert their suggested comments, and then we can consolidate titles.
Right. Both you posted the draft also of that proposed annual report, as well as the charter package. So people can look at that. We'll talk about the annual report here in a little bit, but the charter language. Anybody further discussion of the updated charter language? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed charter language updated as of today's date? Rich Mueller moves.
Second.
Second. All in favor of adopting the updated charter language, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, hearing none, then motion carries unanimously, and we'll publish that updated charter. On what? Okay. We received as a group, an invitation to dinner with the Yakima Valley Conference of Governments for this evening. Mr. Adolph, I would have had to respectfully decline because I didn't get back to Seattle this evening, but hopefully, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit further, or hopefully you've received some RSVPs.
Again, Emily Etheridge, the Regional Transportation Manager for Yakima Valley Conference of Governments. For those in the room and watching on TVW, we are the Metropolitan Regional Planning Organization for the Yakima County area. We provide technical planning and financial administrative assistance to our county and 14 cities and towns in Yakima County. General membership tonight is our annual legislative update. So we'll be having representatives from Senator Murray Campbell's office, from Representative Newhouse, and we do anticipate the Senate ranking member, Senator Curtis King, to also being available. So anybody who still might be in town tonight, it is in Grandview for tonight's dinner and eating event. And if you're interested, we still have some slots open for anybody who would like to attend that. A little history on Yakima, if I may take a few seconds. Yakima is a region in transition. Back in the early 80s, we were losing passenger rail and lost complete service in October of 81, and have not had that benefit as a means of conveyance for the public since. Over the last couple of years, Gary and I have both participated in the Federal Railroad Administration's corridor process that they're doing around the country to look at bringing passenger rail back to rural America, and the route that goes through central Washington, Yakima and Ellensburg and onto Auburn is one of 15 identified nationwide for further planning and coordination. We're also expanding our trail systems, transit. We're going through significant reviews on that, and have been a significant supporter of the DOT's efforts along Snoqualmie Pass as they continue to address that for both the general public and freight movement. So we are in a constant look at trying to be a bigger piece of the state system. That includes our support of anything that improves the movement of transportation in our state. Our region supports. So big supporters of the ports, as we are. We receive a vast majority of our state or our regional income through ag movement, both nationally and internationally. So the ability to move goods, services around the country, around the world is more and more imperative to have good aviation service as well. So we welcome you all here and all those on listening in, and hope that we continue to be a positive resource for not only Central Washington aviation, but supporting the state as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We should turn to the RFQ process. What I have actually got so Ann Richard couldn't be here today, but sent me some group summary of kind of what she needs the group to decide, so that WashDOT can move the contract across the board with the consultants who've submitted responses to our RFQ. I don't know how many have been received. So when we're asking for volunteers to review them on a fairly short timeline, I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'm asking. So the process is that WashDOT's contract office has received proposals and is ready to send them to a review committee. The review committee needs to be either 2 or 4 names of work group members. They could be either voting or non-voting members. Those members of the proposal review committee will get the proposals, rating forms, and proposal review information promptly from WashDOT. The members have to follow the guidance provided and review and score the proposals independently. The proposal review committee must complete the reviews and return the rating forms directly to WashDOT's point of contact no later than next Thursday, 25th. believe this is to keep this all on a time track, to be able to make it work promptly. Anne says she'll be available if there are questions about the reading process over the next week. Once Washout has reviewed the rating forms, they'll generate a short list. Be back at that point, and we'll schedule interviews with shortlisted firms. There then needs to be a consultant interview committee. It can be the same people, or it can be different group of people. Same thing, either 2 or 4 names, either voting or non-voting members from the work group. The interviews will be on Teams, Microsoft Teams video conference on Monday, October 6th. After the interviews are completed, the interview committee members have to complete their rating forms to submit them to Washout's contract office, and Washout will begin contracting with the firm selected as a result of this process. The hope is that we would have a contract in place to be able to introduce the new consultant at the November meeting. We don't have a specific date for the November meeting yet, although with the holidays in November, there are 2 dates that are possible. The idea is pretty much to have this process concluded within about 60 days from that. So any questions about all of that? Let me start looking for volunteers.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Charlie Reardon here. Did I hear you say that you don't know how many firms submitted? Is that correct?
And if anyone does know and can share, it would be useful to know if the people who are signing up to read 2 proposals or 10 in a short time.
That's right. That was my basis. My next question was, by next Thursday, how many do we have to review? And I suspect a contract of this size, they're going to be lengthy proposals to go through. At any rate, I just want to throw that out there. From my perspective, I'd like to volunteer on the first review, but not on the personal interviews. I'm on vacation that week. Thank you.
Chairman, as far as Dunham, I don't know this, but I believe I heard there were 3. And don't hold me to that, but that was my understanding that 3 had responded. And since I have probably reviewed more of these things in my life than most people ever want to, I'd be happy to serve as one of your members.
For either or both committees?
On both.
And I would be happy to volunteer for the interview, but not the review.
And I'll take your other half then. I can do the review, but I won't be out of town for the interview.
Chair, I'm willing to volunteer for the interviews. Maria Battiola.
Interviews on the 6th of October.
Yes.
So it looks like 3 right now.
Where does that leave us for volunteers now?
Okay.
How many do we need?
Ms. Lee, do you want to, before I start going around the room here?
Yeah, thank you. I'll stay on and I'll actually serve on both. Thanks.
Okay. So that actually, people who haven't spoken yet, we have here now. For the initial rating proposal review committee, got Reardon, Mr. Mueller, and Ms. Lee. And then for the interview committee on October 6th, I've got Mr. Ms. Battiola and Ms. Lee. Having not heard from anyone else in the room here,
Mr. Ward. Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to volunteer for both of them. The idea here was that, Anne is going to be on both committees, either whether we have one committee or two committees. She was going to be on there. So the reason for us nominating 2 or 4 was that so there would be an odd number.
Right. Can I ask why we need to have an odd number? But what are
Same question.
the ranked system? So the odds of everyone voting exactly the same for everyone is
Right.
probably not going to happen.
I have the same question as you. And since
It's a scored system,
Scored,
not
yeah.
a yes, no, yes, no. There's no really tiebreaker.
anyone know the answer to that? We have more interest than spots.
I mean, I'm happy to fall off and give it to someone else. I mean, if you wanted 4, we had 4. If you don't, I don't.
That was a suggestion that we do either 2 or 4.
Depending on how you ultimately want to score each section of it, it doesn't matter the number. We have done our own consulting and we've had equal or even odds. And if you take a weighted average of how the scores all turn out, and then it's like you said, it's never going to be exactly the same or very unlikely. And at that point, you maybe have a conversation amongst those who are scoring as to maybe those 2 that are tied, which you would then have a consensus for.
And they can even be tied during the first phase, because then you go to the second phase. So the odds of just having 2 tie, I mean, it works out at the end.
And the first phase is just the short list, and for my perspective, I think that it's better that if anybody wants to volunteer, it gives us an opportunity as members to see what the consultant actually looks like from a first hand. And then the last thing is, it would have been nice to have our WASDOT, contract people here to explain this exactly how this works, if we have questions about it.
Just if they come back and say you have to have an even number, just pull me off. Doesn't bother me.
Okay. That sounds like a solution.
It's like our counterpart that I draw.
Okay, so Mr. Chapman has volunteered to step back if we're required to have no more than 4. And since there's been outpouring, I'll describe it, an outpouring of interest. I'll find out what the group decides. Okay. So is there? I'll read here. So I have Mr. Reardon, Mr. Bach, Ms. Dadiola, Ms. Lee, Mr. Wirt on the. Sorry. Mr. Reardon, Mr. Denham, Mr. Mueller, Ms. Lee, and Mr. Wirt on the proposal review committee, and Mr. Denham, Mr. Taft, Ms. Badiola, Ms. Lee, and Mr. Wirt on the October 6th interview committee. Do I have a motion to adopt those 2 slates as our committees?
So moved.
I'll volunteer also to be eliminated from either one or both to make the numbers work out if that's necessary. I don't care. It's no big deal.
Okay. So we had a motion to approve.
So moved.
Rich seconds. Okay, second, Mr. Mueller. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we will forward those. I will forward those names to, and she will forward them to the contracts office at WASDOT. Okay.
before we go to the next.
I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce the mayor of Yakima, Tricia Byers. Yakima, city of Yakima owns the Yakima airport, so she was able to come today at this point.
Well, welcome. Thank you for doing it. Thanks. That brings us to the next item on our agenda. We'll get ahead of schedule. It's fine.
Question, sir.
Yeah, yes.
Just for equal opportunity, I didn't know if the mayor of Yakima wanted to share anything with us or not, but we wanted to give you the opportunity.
I'm fine, thank you, just leave your list, I appreciate that.
Hopefully you have.
Thanks. All right, we have a deadline to adopt an annual report. The legislature, the deadline is, WashDOT has an internal deadline to staff a report from us that is presented to the legislature, and that internal deadline turns out is October 1st. So having learned that, I went ahead and drafted, based on last year's summary, I would say, annual report. I circulated a first draft to everyone yesterday morning, first thing. It's only about a page and a paragraph summarizing what we've accomplished this year. So we were to speed up the process of producing an annual report and trying to get it out time. Obviously, we prefer to have it in everyone's hands sooner. But Mr. Work put that up on our shared page, our shared Google Drive. There've been a couple of edits to it proposed by Spatiola and Mr. Word. Has everyone had a chance to look at the draft?
I have not seen the edits.
Okay.
So is it possible to pull those up on the screen to discuss?
I don't know about pulling them up on the screen. Is it possible to?
I can share my screen. For
Oh, yeah, you can share your screen.
I have it up here.
Okay, great.
If people want to see it, hang on a minute, I'm gonna go share.
I think we have some that says it on.
So to be clear, this is a first draft that I drafted and circulated to the group for discussion in public today. So if you've not engaged in any private discussions about that,
Anybody see my screen here?
I get it. So.
Oh, okay, there it is. So the only comments, there weren't many, just Maria and I commented. I don't know if anybody else wants to. Has everybody read the initial draft? I guess that's the first question.
So I'll say, Gary, as we're looking at the screen here, everything in black is what I wrote, and then the proposed edits are in purple.
Right.
Can you slow down on the changes, please? You're kind of.
Oh yeah, I'm just yeah. You want to go through from the top? I'm just going to read through it.
Can you enlarge it?
Pardon?
Can you enlarge it?
Big square. Let me see.
If not, it's okay.
I'm not good.
This is 100%, maybe we bump that up, maybe that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah, so make that was 120. There we go. And you just gotta share your screen again.
Can you read that a little bit better now? I guess we could probably pull it up a little more to let me text. See what happens here. On your birthday, focus.
Oh, good, thank you.
There we go.
That's good, thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, that would probably help for the folks in the room.
We turn the lights down a little bit.
I did, but they had popping back up. Changes its mind, it comes back. So it's a smart panel, so it's harder than that. Right now, I just I can stay. Cause I lost it in about 3 minutes of turn back.
While we're getting the light suggested, I'll say there's a lot more language in ESSP 5161. This is kind of the basically the first paragraph of the section from 5161, section 213 that they refine. I use the word refine. You could also say focuses the mission of the work group. And I think we should probably publish that excerpt of ESSB 5161 on our website, because all that's on there now is the 2023 statute that creates a work group, and then a substantial portion of it is vetoed. So the legislature clearly wants some specific findings. They're in section 213. We've got an appropriation of $1.7 million to hire a consultant to kind of work toward those findings. And I think we should probably publish that with some more detail. But given that this is a report to the legislature, I didn't think it made sense to tell the legislature what they told us. They know what they told us.
You can probably move it up here.
Yes.
So go on down.
Yeah. Okay. So I summarized the meetings, and this is where we had some additional.
You got Josh's name wrong, Gracie, not Mark.
Oh.
Marcy, sorry, I was wrong.
I know it's not Mark.
Yeah. Marcy, there. He's and are right next to each other. Thanks.
Well, I got right.
I carried.
M-A-R-C-Y.
That's the correct spelling, isn't it?
M-A-R-C-Y. M-A-R-C-Y, right?
You got it.
We're both wrong.
It's so long to get. Good team.
Scroll down a little. I would correct spelling of geographic and I'd add the work group also, so that it's a complete sense. Otherwise, Bria, thanks for the suggestion.
Welcome.
Oh, hand up here. Like that?
Yes.
Same down here.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any proposed edits to this section of the annual report?
Should we spell out what heel means here? Or is that obvious?
Never use an acronym.
Right. Yeah. The healthy
Maria, can you help us here? What?
HEAL stands for
Healthy Environment for All Act.
and then I summarized what I, based on the agenda, what we were going to do today, and then I have the TBD for November. Scroll down to the next section.
Well, provisions from program, just need to add it in.
Where's that?
Provides the.
Provides.
That is correct. It's not the addition.
Yeah, either is fine.
No, that's fine.
Is there an extra letter?
Probably.
You're right.
I think that's probably a little more correct grammar.
Okay.
Besides, like you spelled out the heel, but in maybe parentheses after you write type heel. You know, healthy environment for all act. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So at the
Chair, this is Maria. The last phrase, the budget proviso does not identify. It requires us to identify highly impacted geographic areas. In other words, the proviso doesn't do the work. We have to do the work.
Yeah.
So if it can read Representative Vice budget proviso, which requires the work group to identify.
Yeah.
Pressure, but you're typing.
Okay.
It's a little cheesy.
So
requires,
Yeah.
budget proviso, which requires the work group.
Nothing worse than having people watch you type.
Pressure.
Doing this actually on the internet, so there's some latency here, and it's a little.
Okay, let's slow down. Healthy environment for, not or. Go back to HEAL Act, please. Healthy environment for all. Go up one line.
He's got a latent delay between hitting a key and what you see. So it doesn't react as fast as you see it. So he'll get there.
Well, you guys are there. You can better track it.
Where in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Apologies, I'm forgetting Representative Fai's first name.
Jay.
Better?
All right. So at the top of the next page, I propose that we make the interim recommendation because it's sort of timely. And that is, and I didn't want to get into the weeds of planning or trying to prescribe a solution. I wanted to keep it pretty high level, trying to find language that I thought everybody could agree on. So we heard the presentation from Payne Field. I had heard the presentation from Sound Transit. Sound Transit talked about the different locations for stations that are near the terminal. They anticipate that all of them would require a shuttle bus. And my point is simply that we should prioritize people who are willing to walk a station that it could be walked with shuttle bus optional. Some of us had side conversations that a world-class airport to rail transit system with tunnel underneath the airport, put the station under the airport terminal, and you could go down the escalator like you do in places like Frankfurt, right to the train. No one anticipates doing that here unless you have a couple $1 billion to spare, but at least having that station at the corner of airport and the airport road and the terminal access drive, where it's about a quarter of a mile away, as opposed to the stations that are up closer to the Boeing plant, would promote rail to air transfers and promote using Link to get to Everett, as opposed to adding a 10 to 15 minute bus transfer between a rail station and a passenger terminal. That is the short to medium term solution. And that we're not the only ones who hit on that. I was looking back at the CACC's findings, and they too anticipated that Payne Field would build out kind of the maximum of their master plan, and would be the short to medium solution. So we're spending multiple billions of dollars on the transit system. We should make that transit system work with other public investments. So,
Maybe just a wordsmithing.
Sure.
A convenient link station, ideally within walking distance, or some. Or walking.
anyone else have thoughts? Language they would add, change?
Yeah.
I feel more strongly about this than this language actually reflects, but you know.
I agree. I mean, as we listen to the Sound Transit presentation, I recognize not everybody on this call was there, but it was a little surprising to me, at least, that we would build this light rail system and not have it come up close to the terminal. I mean, in my mind, even the light rail at Sea-Tac is inconvenient. It's quite a ways away, particularly if people are handicapped. So I think if we really are serious about moving mode shift, if you will, from air to rail, particularly for short haul flights, it makes sense to have a connection as close to the airport as you can get. And you'll see that in my presentation this afternoon about Sea-Tac. I talk about that a bit because it's the same idea at Sea-Tac.
Well, do we strongly recommend?
We could.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that changes anything, but if we really feel this is that important, maybe use a little more pointed language to say strongly recommended.
Part of the grander DOT philosophy is connectivity across all modes. So yes, with regards to rail and the airport, I think that which the discuss matches. I think we also might want to touch on making sure other accessibility modes to the airport or to Sound Transit to them are also addressed, so that if you are coming on a traffic bus and you don't have necessarily something very close to the transition to the terminal, that is something to strive for as well. But I agree with the language. If we can also include accessibility and connectivity in the language.
Right. And to that end too, we can't, it's not just passengers. Airports are large employers. And if you're building out what Mr. Morrison described as Greenfield's master plan, you're going to employ a lot more people. Those people are not going to drive and pay airport rates to park. We're going to be taking the bus, which currently stops at the corner of the airport access road and airport road, or they'll be taking Link. And so having those, just like people who work at Sea-Tac now.
So maybe on the last sentence, maximizes the value of public investment in connectivity and accessibility to the airport or to airports.
Why don't we make that a new sentence instead of making that sentence longer? And
That'd be fine.
we want to write that and then we'll type it up and we can, the rest of the board is pretty straightforward.
When is this due again?
Watch that, the total deadline is October 1st. Okay.
Something like that, okay, do you think?
like what they say, Josh was saying about for both passengers and for employees. I think that could get lost.
Or you want me to type this part?
Yeah.
Wait, my computer.
Do you need a link to the document?
It's just kind of. I have that.
Okay.
I think my. I think I'm out of this town.
Traveling, not driving. Traveling this morning.
Right. And then what your suggestion about connectivity and accessibility?
And I can just add that.
I'm just making that last, this results in improved connectivity and just only good.
You know, use this and start choosing.
Chair. This is Maria. I'd like to suggest at the last sentence to include community resiliency. So to read, this results in improved connectivity, accessibility. There you go. You got it. I'm sorry, there's a word, community climate resiliency. The term community resiliency is just so broad.
I honestly, I just like community resiliency because it covers climate and other issues that communities face. Economic, for example. So, I mean, I'm not saying climate is wrong. I would just like, by leaving resiliency covers resiliency in other areas as well.
It's not inclusive.
And Maria, I have climate in set 4.
Yeah, I would like to, I like that idea. Let's say community climate and economic resiliency, because that's one of the goals too.
Because I could give you another 5, but if we say resiliency, just say,
it's all
inclusive. It's all that. So I would prefer to have the more inclusive language of just community resiliency.
Yeah. Different communities have different needs. Being too specific here limits their ability to adapt.
And I don't want to look like our group, favored ones over the other or neglected some.
Thank you. I can accept that.
All right. Any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I have one more thoughts under accessibility. Could it be accessibility in accordance to the ADA requirements?
So I have a concern about that, and that's just because I'm trying to keep this simpler, and there's a lot of technical ADA
State federal funding would hire it anyway.
It's already
required. Again, it's more inclusive as a broader statement.
And I do have one more question. I understand that this statement is strongly recommending for Painfield, but what about other areas of sound transit as well, close to airports or any airports? We're talking multimodal, or are we trying to stick just with the recommendation of Painfield? Just so I'm clear.
A lot of it is focusing on what we did this year, and this is a recommendation that leads directly from what we studied in the 2 meetings earlier this year. And I think as we move forward, we should think about that for other existing airports and transit. And if as the legislature suggests, we are also supposed to look at new airport locations potentially. We have to think about that too, but this is just focused on what we learned from our fact gathering this year.
Thank you.
All right. So any other thoughts on that paragraph? We can move down to the membership section.
I like it. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a proposal to add a section here on the non-voting members, but we don't have the numbers to plug in. We could just say, just take out that sentence and just go with it.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to say to date invitations have been sent and we're anticipating positive response, period.
Yeah, we can just say invitation has been sent and work efforts will continue to recruit additional non-voting members. Something like that.
Trying to make passive voice. You're not simple. Okay. How does that look? Efforts to recruit will continue.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay.
Personally, I'm kind of surprised that more people don't jump up and want to be part of this because what we're doing here has huge impact in the Puget Sound region, particularly, as well as the entire state.
But I think maybe a lot of people did not have a very good experience first go round and don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
But
we won first go around. No.
That's why I'm here now.
So, as far as the list of members, I actually went back to the state website as to who's listed as a member, but I think Gary, you're correct that we've had two drop off, even though they are still formally appointed. So I would believe these two. Should be some way to extend changes.
There is. This is a comment, incidentally, and I can just leave it a comment. I think here.
Oh yeah, I think when I was tallying up for this paragraph, I was counting the two that we just deleted. So it's actually, so it should be 6 members who completed their additional votes and wait for the appointment while continuing to serve.
Yeah.
6 positions are figured.
Yeah, if you change that to 6 positions and you add that to the number of signatures you have down below here, it equals 19. So
okay. Anyone else have comments, questions, suggestions? And if not, is there a motion to adopt what we wordsmith here as our annual report?
So moved.
All right. All in favor of adopting documents that currently exist as the 2025 annual report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. We have a timely annual report. Next year we'll have I'll just note this as adopted, and we'll go ahead and finalize this. Okay. And we'll delete the comments. Okay. So I had on here that we could always, like we did last year, if we needed to have another meeting for it, but not the reports. We don't need to have the meeting without the report. We're running ahead of schedule. We've reached the point on the agenda here where we were going to talking about in court. I will say I went and looked at because it's subsection A and section. I went and looked at what the CAWG found, and they found nothing because they were actually precluded by the statute that created them from investigating a joint use airport JPLM. And language of that actually says as much. State law that created the CAWG in 2019 forbade siting a facility on or in the vicinity of a military installation that would be incompatible with the installation's ability to carry out its mission requirements. I think it's one of those subjects where I think we formally need to do some more fact finding. At least this is what I do, but I think it's pretty clear, absent some sea change, where this discussion is headed. Notwithstanding that there are joint use airports elsewhere in the country. But I think we should schedule some future briefings. Anyone have thoughts?
I agree. I mean, and Rob was on the previous group. You might have a little background he wants to present on what kind of work you did on that group, Rob, about McCord and where that kind of leaves us.
Well, there's both the active component and reserves in the Army, and then there's the active component reserves in the Air Force, both Fort Lewis and McCord Field. In addition, there's also the Navy, Naval Station, and they also had concerns. So there was quite a bit of collaborative conversation with various different representatives of each of those three services, and pretty universal in response that it would impact military missions. In addition, two of the three sites, the two sites in Thurston County were also determined to be in conflict with military missions. And you may know both the Air Force and the Navy have extensive military training routes in the region that also impacted siting of various different locations. So there's pretty significant, and in addition, at the time, Congressman Diddy strongly opposed. And so I think it is worthwhile to follow the process and make sure that we have dotted the I and crossed the T. But there was such substantial resistance and fairly well articulated conflict between military operations and what was being proposed, that I would suspect at the end of the day we'd have the same place.
This is Mr. Chair. This is Charlie Reardon. I too, I think that this needs to be part of our work that is evaluated during this process. I realize what Rob just said, and that was the last go at this. But to be due diligent, to complete our due diligence and do the work that we've been tasked to do, that has to be included in what we look at and what we evaluate, I mean, we also need to hear those oppositions, or we need to hear from those people as we proceed over the next couple of years. You know, things change, congressmen change, generals, admirals, and needs of the military change too. So I think we need to document that we actually had a look at it and heard some genuine pieces of information for ourselves during this process. So I too think that we at least need to have a go at letting them tell us about their thoughts about how that joint use military base, or it's not a joint use military base, but how it fits into this equation or doesn't fit into this equation. Thank you.
Might I also recommend whether it would be, I don't know if the state aviation office would have the information or if we would need FAA, but where there are existing dual use airports, McCarran in Phoenix, a few others like back east, if there are pros and cons associated with existing that may be advanced warning for us, and let alone any unforeseen costs that we would not see, where we might see savings.
I apologize. This is Gitanjali. Could the people in the room get closer to the mic, please, so we could hear you online?
Your microphones are off.
Oh, ours are. Oh, okay.
Except to move it a little bit closer to me. Also, welcome to the room. My recommendation was that whether it's the state aviation, DOT aviation office, or we bring in somebody from FAA to discuss existing dual use airports around the country and any pros and cons, or I think many of those, please correct me if anybody can, if I'm wrong, they were joint due to post-war needs and city growth at the time. That after the fact merging of such a strategy may not be something we're familiar with, and so any unexpected costs that we would not, from an outside view and analysis, realize may actually be a negative option for us if we were to jump in full bore with a dual airport or a dual use airport with court, but bringing in some recommendation nationwide.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment also. I agree with Charlie. We need to listen to what they have to say. I think probably how we approach this will be part of what our group that we're going to hire will outline, and we'll wait and see what their recommendations are. But they will probably be part of the decision that we make, is how they handle what we need to look at.
Right, and right, we shouldn't lose track of the fact that we're about to have a consultant, so will help us kind of guide us through that discussion we're talking about. Mr. Dunham, I was going to ask, you're familiar with what happened in San Diego and the process that went on there when there were proposals to try to use military facilities that ultimately didn't go forward, as I recall. Am I correct?
What happened in San Diego? A study was done. It was about a 2-year study on how they might relieve some of the things at San Diego International Airport. It was looking for other sites, other possibilities. After a 2-year study, the one that came up was a joint use of the Navy military facility there. It actually went to a vote of the people of the county of San Diego, obviously a very Navy-related city, and it got voted down. But that was the only other option they had, was something that was like 50 miles out of the city in the high desert with a $5 billion people mover to it. but it went all the way through a very long-term study, and it was picked as the only reliever that made sense at that point in time. And nothing has changed there. I still chair their advisory committee.
That was the joint proposal to joint use at Miramar, right?
Yes.
So I think this is a, discussion to be continued, and we can pick this back up too in that section of agenda later today, where we're going to talk about future meetings. I should say, does anyone else have anything to add to this right now?
I guess it would be a matter of how we go about scheduling this. Assuming we're going to have a meeting in November, I'm thinking that our consultant would be on board by then. And we could, at least at our November meeting, then task our consultant to help guide us in deciding whether or not McCord is something that we need to pursue or give up on.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have anything to discuss right now, or should we be ready for?
Chair? This is Maria. I recall the legislation that authorized us had a very clear statement about McCord. So just reminding folks to refer to that first before we engage the consultant on this work item.
Yeah, as I think that the legislature asked for our findings, and we essentially reported that we didn't have it yet. And so you're right. I think if we prioritize this question.
Yeah, my recollection was that it prohibited us from exploring that option, but I remain fallible with my memory, so asking the staff to check that, please.
All right. Well, we've reached our lunch break in our agenda 20 minutes early. So, are we break for lunch? Hearing no opposition to that. All right. We'll take our lunch break and we'll be back on at 12:30 for Mr. Hodgman. Next up on our agenda is Mr. Hodgman's presentation regarding the Yakima Airport. So, right.
Okay, thank you. Slides are up. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present. Thank you for coming to Yakima. We want you to see what it's like not only in the Yakima area but across Central and Eastern Washington. We have a tremendous amount to offer here, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Yakima. Actually, I'm going to talk about two things. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of an orientation to Yakima Air Terminal and some of the things that we're doing. And then I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to talk about a concept that I want to share with you called distributed air service, which has to do with leveraging advanced air mobility to help solve our looming overcapacity problem at Sea-Tac Airport. So first, welcome to Yakima. 300 days of sunshine a year. Hops, fruit, wine, and all kinds of amazing outdoor activities.
Sorry for laughing at the 300 days, but we say that in the Tri-Cities, and there's this person in our community that writes us and says, do you know, technically, it's like 289. Every year, he corrects us on the amount of sunshine in the day. It just makes me laugh because it's, we say the same thing. It's kind of.
Okay, so our airport was established in 1926, so next year will be our 100-year anniversary. Pretty exciting we are. Part 139 commercial service airport, and we have our air service currently provided by Alaska Airlines Horizon. We're working on some other routes. 825 acres. We have two runways. Our primary runway is 7,600
feet in length, which is adequate for 737s and some 757s. Our passenger volume in 2024 was 84,000. That's both enplanements and deplanements. And our operations were 41,000 takeoffs and landings. Our master plan really highlighted that our terminal building was a priority. And so with that, we started a multi-year, multi-phase series of projects to modernize the original 1950 building to meet modern today's standards air service, both air cargo and passenger service. The last model was done 25 years ago in 2000, and the building shows it. We have roof leaks everywhere, failing HVAC. I won't read the list to you. You can read that yourself. It's a pretty compelling case that this terminal modernization is well overdue. The good news is, as of right now, we have 3 projects underway for the terminal and 1 project for our crosswind runway to rehabilitate the crosswind runway. So we are moving with energy to solve some of these problems. This project is under construction right now, and this is the before picture. What you probably can't see on the picture on the right is that there are a whole bunch of HVAC units that have had a white X painted on them, which means they're no longer functioning. They've just been abandoned in place. And so year after year after year, as these systems have failed, they've just left them. We're in the process of cleaning that all up right now. And so you can see this is a construction ongoing. We're probably a couple months away from completion of this project. And it kind of lays the groundwork for improvements inside. Obviously, as long as the roof is leaking, you can't really improve a lot of the interior space. Also underway is our baggage claim project. We just gave notice to proceed about a week ago. This is the current situation, and I'm told from people who grew up in the community, people my age and older, that this has been here since they were a little kid. The stainless steel slide, really hard for anybody to grab their bag, especially when they're stacked 3 high. The garage doors open and the heat or the cold from the outside comes pouring in, and the space is so small that literally half of the deplaned passengers can occupy the baggage claim space, and the other are a little bit further, kind of out in the hallway. There's not enough room for everybody even to fit into the room. So our baggage claim project that over the next many months is going to completely transform this space. It's going to double its size, bring in a baggage carousel, and update all of the fixtures, finishes. In addition, we'll be remodeling both of the existing restrooms and creating a family restroom, as well as a family lounge that's kid-friendly for people with little ones who are traveling. Follow-on phases next year, ticketing, baggage screening, the lobby area, and rental car space. And then in 2027, the building exterior, complete facelift of the building exterior, internal systems. So that would be the fire suppression system, the hot water, a variety of the sewer. All those things are in many cases original, 75 years old, and have surpassed their life expectancy. And then, of course, the restaurant is very near and dear to everyone who has a history in Yakima, so we're working hard to bring that back. Any questions or thoughts about that before I shift gears? All right.
What kind of capacity for passengers do you anticipate that all of the series of projects will take you to?
Well, we're at 84,000 now. I anticipate we can easily get to 250,000 a year. We have some other improvements, moving some gates upstairs. We have to have the passenger volume to justify that. And I'm going to talk to you a minute about distributed air service and leveraging electric aviation. And so I'm going to take a deeper dive into that and talk about that a little bit. That's a real game changer for everyone. So distributed air service. Rep 5, you've got your hand raised, sir?
Yes, I do. Can you tell me about the funding for your projects?
Absolutely. This has been a patchwork quilt. Let's see, where's the camera? Right here. This has been a patchwork quilt of funding. We've had a lot of assistance from Congressman Newhouse in particular. We've also had a lot of assistance from the county through their seed program. We have a CURB grant and a variety of different. I mean, it's Every project is different. Like, for example, the baggage claim project that we just kicked off, 3 different federal grants and then funding from the county as well. So 4 funding sources to do one project. And we're keeping these, so this is like a $2.4 million project. And even then, it's 4 different funding sources to make it work. So it definitely is some creative grant writing in order to get the funding.
Thank you.
All right, so emerging technology. I'm going to kind of frame, and I know this group has, there's some legislation that talks about revisiting the Puget Sound Regional Council study. I was part of the study team. I'm very familiar with the data. Just to kind of tee it up a little bit, I think probably everybody already knows that the Puget Sound Regional Council did a study that was released in 2020 that told us we have a big problem. And that big problem is that by 2050, there will be 27 passengers a year that will want to get on a plane and there will be no seat for them. And 800,000 metric tons of freight that will want to ship by air, and there's no capacity for them to ship. And so that's kind of what created the CAC, and now what has kind of follow on this commercial aviation work group. The estimates, and it's hard to say exactly at what point Sea-Tac is going to reach full capacity. The most recent I heard was the Aviation System Plan 2032. But as I've been monitoring the employments and the air cargo volume at Sea-Tac, they're actually growing faster than was anticipated. So not sure exactly when they'll implement slot control. And if you're not familiar with slot control, every airline is given a certain number of slots for their planes. And what that does is kind of creates artificial constraint on supply. And so therefore demand continues to go up. So prices go up. Certain routes will be eliminated. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on. But not only is Sea-Tac the primary deplanement location in the state, I'd say about 80% of passengers, commercial air passengers, travel through Sea-Tac. But it's also a primary connecting hub for many communities, Yakima being one of those. We have 2 flights a day to and from Seattle. That's our only destination. Wenatchee's the same. Walla Walla is the same. Tri-Cities obviously has a few other destinations, but Buck has several flights to go to Sea-Tac. Spokane, several flights to go to Sea-Tac. And so as Sea-Tac reaches full capacity, airlines and the FAA implements slot control, airlines are going to have to choose which destinations they want to serve. Airlines are for-profit entities. They're going to choose the destinations that are the most profitable. And I'll tell you that Yakima is not one of those. We're a very small community compared to the volume of passengers that go through Sea-Tac, 2 flights a day. It's a 76-seat airplane. Wenatchee is going to be the same. Walla Walla is going to be the same. And even Tri-Cities and Spokane will be affected, maybe not as much. But we're at right now, Yakima with only Sea-Tac as our connection. If we were to lose that, we would lose air service altogether. So the overcapacity situation that's coming at Sea-Tac is not just the Seattle metropolitan area. It's across the state. What I'm going to show you here is that I think we have a possible solution using existing airports. So what is distributed air service? Well, it's based on this emerging aviation technology, advanced air mobility. And in the second paragraph, you can see advanced air mobility actually includes 2 things. It includes urban air mobility, which is primarily the air taxis, the electric vertical takeoff and landing, short distance for very built up areas. And then regional air mobility, which is primarily electric, hybrid electric, and maybe someday hydrogen, hybrid propulsion to connect communities. So city to city, not intra-city, inter-city. So distributed air service is really kind of based on regional air mobility, leveraging that connection from airport to airport. So it's distributing the load. And the point that I want to make here, as I kind of mentioned before, the majority of passengers, commercial air passengers, go through Sea-Tac. They either in plane, Sea-Tac, or they connect through Sea-Tac. Distributed air service takes advantage of other existing general aviation airports that we already have across the state. And I have a slide, I'm going to show you that. And what that does is it enables passengers to board a plane in their local community general aviation airport and bypass Sea-Tac completely. So it's a pressure relief valve for Sea-Tac. And there's many other benefits that I'll talk about in just a minute. Distributed air service. So, for example, just got one icon here that shows Sea-Tac Airport. There are 11 commercial service airports in Washington State. I don't want to take anything away from them. Yakima is one of them. But by far, the majority of passengers travel through Sea-Tac. And that's what we're experiencing, is that throughout Puget Sound, I lived in Puget Sound for many, many years, you drive to Sea-Tac. No matter which community you're in, whether you're in Renton or Bremerton or Puyallup or Olympia or Tacoma or wherever you are, unless you're in Everett, you're driving to Sea-Tac. What distributed air service proposes is that we distribute that load, you bypass Sea-Tac, and instead you go to your local general aviation airport and you board your plane there, and you go then to your connecting flight. Let me expand on this a little bit more. In 2020, WashDOT released its electric aircraft feasibility study. I was part of the project team that delivered this. You can see the key in the bottom left corner, and it shows the icons, those 11 commercial service airports. They're the orange dots with the blue circles. The study identified 60 additional general aviation airports across the state that can accommodate these emerging electric airplanes. And you can see the Cascades go right down the middle and the Olympic Mountains up in the northwest. With the exception of those two land masses, the even dispersion of these airports, you couldn't have done it better if you've been deliberate. And this was all done on its own. All these airports exist. Most of them are woefully underutilized. And we have communities across the state. So while we're primarily solving for the Seattle metropolitan high-density population, the added benefit is that all these people in these remote communities have the same level of access to air service now. When you start using all these existing airports, you just drive to your closest general aviation airport that supports electric aviation, and then you connect onto your destination. So here's Yakima in the middle, and you can see these concentric circles, 100 and 200 miles. That's because the range of these airplanes is normally 200 miles or maybe even a little bit more than that. So you can see whether it's Yakima represented here or one of the other commercial service airports, there's a lot of area that can be covered with these electric airplanes, the state as it is laid out now. So imagine, and I'm going to talk about this in greater detail in a minute, imagine if not only it was Yakima, but let's say that Wenatchee was also doing it, and Pullman was also doing it, and Walla Walla was also doing it. Imagine these concentric circles overlaying each other. Now you have this network. So again, this is Yakima just representing all the destinations. So those are two-way arrows. You can see the flights go back and forth. And the other thing about electric aviation is it's scalable. It's scalable in terms of the size of the airplane, and it's scalable in terms of the frequency of that flight. So for example, Sea-Tac, last I knew, had 8 cycles a day. Sometimes they have 9 cycles a day where planes land, passengers deplane, passengers in plane, and planes take off 8 or 9 times a day. So you could see that a robust community where passengers are getting on an electric plane might have up to 8 or 9 cycles a day. But you might have a very, very rural community. They might have one flight twice a week. Small airplane, large airplane, the number of cycles in a day or in a week. Electric aviation is very scalable. So at Yakima, we currently have this 7,600-foot runway. The orange box represents a notional 9,600-foot runway. That'll accommodate the largest planes. I would say maybe not the international freighters, but anything domestic. The CAC work that was done earlier determined that what we're solving for is domestic transportation, primarily origin destination Seattle. And so if Seattle high density population is the problem statement, then you want to be able to meet the domestic air travel, whether it's Miami or Dallas or New York, Philadelphia, wherever it might be, and the larger planes can get you there. So, well, Yakima can currently accommodate all 737s, some 757s, the A320, 321. I'm sorry, that's Airbus. By extending the runway, we can accommodate even larger planes than that. And that's the same at a variety of these different airports across the state. And I have a chart that's going to explain that. So here we are. That's 46,000. That's enplanements. We estimate we can get to 7.5 million annual passengers if we grow the airport that we have. And just to give you an example, San Diego Airport, and I know we have a gentleman on the team that has experience there. Last data I pulled, San Diego did 20 million annual passengers. So single runway airport and a 9,400 foot runway. So remember, aspirationally, we're shooting for 9,600. San Diego has 9,400 foot runway, 48 gates, 633 acres. Yakima, we already have 825 acres, aspirational 1,200. And you can see, and if you come in the tower, you can see the amount of land that's available. But San Diego does 20 million annual passengers. Now, is that a tight fit? Of course it is. I'm not saying that Yakima could do 20 million annual passengers, but let's say that even if we all just did 5, if each regional commercial service airport was able to support 5 million annual passengers, let's take a look at that and see what that would look like. So some of the benefits of distributed air service, obviously, Sea-Tac is the problem we're solving for. It relieves pressure at Sea-Tac, takes advantage of existing airport infrastructure, and passengers board at their local general aviation airport. Look at this list of benefits that you get with leveraging infrastructure that we already have. But distributed air service is distributing the load twice. It's distributing the load at the origin where you in-plane, and then it's also distributing the load where you make your connecting flight. So you can see here all the other commercial service airports with the exception of Sea-Tac. I think I got them all. Maybe I missed one. And their runway lengths. So the runway length is tied to what size of plane they can accommodate. And you can see some data over there on the right that shows the runway lengths required for these different single aisle, narrow body domestic airliners, which is what we're solving for. Some airports might have the runway a little bit too short for some of these planes, but in general, most of these airports that already exist can accommodate these 737s and A320s. So here's the same map, and here's all the airports represented. What I want to draw your attention to is they're already Part 139 airports. So they're already doing commercial service. They all already have a terminal building. They all already have a runway long enough to accommodate these domestic jet airliners. I was telling Evan earlier, I like to use the analogy of Sea-Tac on a perfect day, perfect weather, high efficiency, can probably do 80 takeoffs and landings an hour. At Yakima Commercial Service, we do 4 takeoff and landings a day. We have tremendous untapped capacity. Wenatchee is the same way. Walla Walla is the same way. And although Spokane and Tri-Cities have more, they still have lots of capacity. The existing airport infrastructure that we have, not only the general aviation airports dispersed across the state, as you can see, but then these other commercial service airports also spread across the state. We have tremendous existing capacity with very little public money investment. We could get started as soon as the electric airplanes come online, we can get started with really no investment whatsoever. These are some of the developers of both the electric, hybrid electric airplanes and the electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. It's a moving landscape. Companies come and go. They change their structure. They change what they're focusing on. Electric aviation is not of age yet, but it is absolutely coming. So this is an example of what we envision for Yakima. You can see our terminal, and there's those two little boxes out to the rectangles out to the right and left. So that's gates 1 and 5. And our vision for Yakima Air Terminal is that we move 2 gates and TSA upstairs, which opens up the entire downstairs floor that's currently the sterile area, after you get screened by TSA. We open that up, and now we can have non-TSA screened passengers that board that plane in Chehalis or in Bremerton or Thunfield and Puyallup, fly into Yakima. We walk them through these corridors, so they're segregated from the side area, the secure identification display area, into the lower portion of the terminal that's open to the public. It's non-sterile. It's open to the public. And we then process them with their ticketing. They drop off their bags. They go upstairs, go through TSA, and then they board the large jet airliners. So this is a concept for those airplanes that need to be charged. Not all of them will need to be charged. A lot of the hybrid ones will not need to be charged. But we can charge up to 9 airplanes at the same time. And some of these are pretty small airplanes. A 9-passenger airplane, how long does it take for everybody to get off the plane? What, 3 or 4 minutes? It's not very long. And so we have to cycle them through. So we have holding areas. We drop off the passengers. We taxi them to one of the charging stations. They charge, they clean the plane, and then they come back and they pick up their passengers and they go on their way. I want to recognize that WashDOT is thinking the same thing. This was published earlier this year, and there's a lot of material in this document. But I highlighted this portion that talks about regional air mobility and what it can do for communities. So this is not just me talking about this. WashDOT is working on this advanced air mobility as well. So here are the key takeaways of considering this as a solution. Sea-Tac Airport will soon reach capacity and will have slot control. Existing general aviation airports may be the solution. We have tremendous untapped capacity, better traveling experience for the public across the board, less travel time, less time on the road, more predictable arrival at the airport, less hassle at the airport, less expensive for electric aviation, the environment benefits, and then the communities benefit. Every single one of these general aviation airports that implements this is going to have a tremendous uptick in their economic growth and vitality. So this is a win-win for everyone. And with that, any questions or comments or discussion?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I certainly agree with everything you said about what's going to happen when we get electric planes in the air. In looking at your number of charging stations, as all airports are going through right now, are you sure that you will be able to come up with enough power to handle something like this? The places like Denver is having to look at small nuclear plants just to get enough power to run the airport. That's one question. And I know in the Northwest we're lucky because we have a little bit more power than some of the others that provide it all by burning coal on the East Coast. The other one is all of these are indication your sample where all of them would fly in from these other 10 or 15 little airports to Yakima. I certainly understand how that works. Where are you going to get the carriers to take them to where they want to go? You compare it to San Diego, it's not, as you said, it's not really a comparison. San Diego, 20 million people go there because they want to go to Southern California at the beach. Not saying anything against Yakima, I was just there last week, and it's a nice place, but I think we're going to get 20 million people to go there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, what you're looking to is to put them on another plane instead of going to Sea-Tac and connecting to a flight to Kansas City or us or something. You're going to put them on another plane that by some air carrier, commercial air carrier. And other than right now, if you look around the United States, the only way people are getting that kind of service is the U.S. government's Essential Air Service program. And is that the direction it's going to go? Because an airline is going to be very hesitant. And I'm sorry our friend from Alaska isn't on to tell you his view on how many passengers you need a day before they're going to put service in there. So with everything you said, I'm just saying, how do you get over these next couple of bumps?
Well, those are both great questions. So the first one about electric. The electric aviation industry is still evolving. We haven't settled it. For example, not all airplanes even have the same plug. It's kind of like if you're my age, you remember VCRs, both VHS and Beta. Beta was the superior technology, but VHS was the one that won out. So we're kind of in that same situation right now with the plugs that go into the planes. There's no standard yet, and there are many other things that are not a standard. My sense is that only the smallest planes are going to be all electric, purely because of the energy density in batteries. And battery technology is diminishing returns. We're getting lots smaller improvements for a lot of investment. Likely, the larger airplanes, 30 passengers and up, will be hybrid electric. So the question is, do they even need to charge when they're sitting on the apron? I anticipate that answer is no, but I don't know for sure. We'll have to see what evolves over time with the industry. So the question about how much power do you need, it might solve itself. It might only be the smallest airplanes that need to charge. Now still, one of the operators is quoting that they need about 450 kilowatt hours. So if you were to do 9 of those planes at a time, what is it, 3.6, 3.7 megawatts, something like that. Now, I've talked to my utility, and I've asked them for 30 megawatts in 10 years, and they're very supportive of that. Obviously, different communities and their utilities. We've got a completely different challenge across country and across the state. Demand for electricity is going up as we push more and more things to electric. So there will probably be utilities that will go nuclear. I don't know if we need something specifically on the airport for that, but I'm not sure how big the electric charging problem is to solve. We're trying to install 2 chargers, but my sense is the larger planes are probably going to be hybrid something, either hybrid Jet A or hybrid hydrogen or something like that. As far as the air carriers, so this industry hasn't really taken shape yet. In my mind, the approach that makes sense is that a large airline is vertically integrated. So, for example, Delta operates its main line, and then it has a regional carrier that does its regional flying. Alaska Air Group has Alaska Airlines, and they have Horizon Air. One of the things that's important to the airlines is getting the passenger into their system. So getting specifically for Yakima, one of the things that's valuable about Yakima passengers is getting them to Seattle so that they can connect on an Alaska Airlines flight to wherever they're going. Alaska just recently merged with Hawaiian, and so they have a lot of capacity they're trying to fill. So I think this vertical integration, that would be my sense of how this would go, is that they would have a third line of business. So they'd have their domestic and international, they'd have their regional, and then they'd have their micro regional. We'll see what shapes up with the industry. It's going to be the industry does what industry does, right? And I'm not going to sit here and try and tell them how to do it. There will be carriers that will emerge that will try to get a piece of this, and maybe initially that's what it's going to look like. But I think once it pencils out and the airlines can see the financial benefit, I would anticipate ultimately the airlines would adopt this. So hopefully I answered your questions. Was there anything else on that?
Yeah, I got a question. Go ahead. This is Charlie Reed. Hey, Rob. Thanks. Nice presentation. I know there are several electronic, Vertical Aerospace has they're developing an electric aircraft in Manchester, I believe, or somewhere, Edinburgh, Manchester, England, I think. But anyway, I know United Airlines and American Airlines made a big investment in those companies for them to, in that company specifically, for them to develop this aircraft for this business model. I'm kind of with you on this. This is not an if, but when. Now, how it fits into Yakima and all the questions or it's just to ask about, electric needs and all that. Obviously, to answer those kind of questions, we need an economist to dig into that and kind of answer those questions. But from our position, looking at the state and how we relieve Sea-Tac's capacity issues, this is one of those elements that should be included in our analysis to look at the future. There's vertical aerospace, there's Archer, there's Lift. Vertical aerospace is in England. They will be faster to market than the United States of America Archer and Lift because they are going to be approved for commercial air service, for approval to fly passengers in an aircraft faster than the ones in the United States of America being approved by the FAA. So this is not an if, but when. And for us as a committee, I would like to see if we can't get the CEO of Vertical Aerospace to present at one of our meetings just to talk about this. I saw one of his presentations on YouTube, and they're coming fast to market. So this is going to be a game changer, down the road. How you get the airlines to work into this, Horace? I mean, as far as are they going to fly to Yakima or any other city? I'm sure the invisible hand of the market will take care of that, but it's going to happen. But anyway, nice presentation. I think this is going to happen. A lot of ancillary questions have to be answered, but as far as solving the capacity issues at Sea-Tac over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, this is going to be one of those pieces of the puzzle. Thank you.
And, as I mentioned, if each airport only did 5 million annual passengers times 8 airports, that's 40 million annual passengers. And instead of having just one location, this large mega airport that nobody wants, where you build up and build up and build up until you again get to full capacity, you have multiple locations across the state that can be slowly built up as demand requires. Maybe not all of them will do the same volume of service. Some might do more, some might do less, some might need more development, some might need less, but it's extended over time. You don't have to come up with $50 billion to build a brand new airport somewhere. They're open and ready to go now. Evan, you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for the presentation. A lot of new information. But I'm having trouble with some. What piece of it does the electric air technology solve?
A good question.
That makes it feasible when it's electric, but they're not doing it now because small airports are the people in those towns aren't flying places very often, and if they do, they're driving to the nearest airport. So you're competing against driving. You can already, 9-seater smaller planes like your, Cessna Grand Caravan types can already be operated with one pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, one pilot, 9 passengers, jet fuel. You still have to have a pilot flying an electric plane.
Mm-hmm.
So is the idea that an electric 9-seat plane, the fuel cost is so much lower that all of a sudden it's economically feasible to operate, Aberdeen to Yakima on a 9-seat electric plane when it's not to fly a Cessna Grand Caravan the same distance with the same number of passengers?
Yes, that's part of it. So that's a great question. Let me expand on that a little bit. So if you think about an electric airplane, an all electric airplane, if you ever have been in a home that has a ceiling fan, how much maintenance have you had to do on that motor and that ceiling fan? 0. So not only is the maintenance cost of an electric airplane dramatically less than a combustion engine airplane, but the operating cost, as you say, the cost of the fuel, the electricity is much less. Now, if you take a look at a hybrid, now in the near term, it's going to be probably a Jet A engine, right? So you're still going to have the combustion. Now we're going to try and get to sustainable aviation fuel, which is going to reduce some of the emissions, but not all of the emissions. But that really is just kind of a lily pad to leap from hybrid Jet A to hybrid hydrogen. And many of you know that Alaska Airlines gave a Q400 to Zero Avia ZeroAvia is based in Everett, but also operating in the UK. And they are a vertically integrated aerospace hydrogen company. The handwriting is on the wall. The Q400 is given to be converted to an all hydrogen or hydrogen hybrid electric airplane. That's a 76-seat airplane. So if you're talking hydrogen as the fuel, again, no emissions. And I know Rich has some experience because of what they do at Moses Lake with various different hydrogen modules. And that's probably something maybe at some point you want to hear about, and maybe we can bring other experts in. But I think, it's the operating costs and the emissions, and then the maintenance costs. Anyone else?
I've noticed carriers are moving. A lot of these smaller communities used to have commercial service back in the civil aeronautics or regulated days with 19-seat planes, and I remember flying on the 37-seat Dash 8s that were phased out by Alaska in favor of 76-seat Q400s. So I mean, I think it's interesting and intriguing that we could potentially see a return in that to smaller airports having commercial, or what the FAA would call it, air taxi service, right, under the smaller planes with
Or 135.
right. What kind of timeline are we talking about for this being kind of commercially viable?
Maria, I see your hand, so I'll get to you in just a second. Well, so we're waiting on FAA certification in some cases. Some of the operators out there are fairly close. They're within 2 to 3 years, but that's not the full mobilization of industry. It's probably in the neighborhood of 10 years, and that's just me guessing. So the Great Recession of 2008 and 9 is what caused the airlines to reconfigure themselves. They started eliminating routes to the smaller airports, and they started eliminating the smaller airplanes. And then the larger airplanes, they bought airplanes with even more seats and more fuel economy. And they started focusing primarily on large hub and medium hub airports. And that was just a financial move because of what was happening in the industry. But it stuck, and it stuck for a long time. And so many of us have seen, the past 10, 15 years, that we're all making the trek to these large airports. I can tell you right now, we're in conversation at Yakima with an air carrier that is shifting to a 50-seat plane. And so I think we're beginning to see the industry evolve a little bit. We're just on the front end of it, I think. So to answer your question, we're probably about 10 years out for this to be full scale. And I would say when you look at how much time do we have before Sea-Tac reaches full capacity, we're in a race against the clock, right? And there will be providers that will pop up sooner than that. There's some small airplanes that are being developed, that orders are being taken, but that's just the beginnings of it. So whether this group ultimately decides to support this solution or whether we go with something else, the reality of what's happening at Sea-Tac is it's coming hard and fast, and we cannot dawdle. Maria.
She didn't realize that you were asking her to talk.
Maria, did you have a question?
Yes, please. It's intriguing. It's very promising. My question is more along, is there a coordinated planning, long-term planning for this, or is that something that the legislature needs to be, that a request for funding needs to be made at the legislature? Because I'm very aware the CAWG's timeline is short in terms of developing our report.
I am not aware of a specific function that's been created where everyone works together. In my time at Wash.Aviation, I kept in contact with the aerospace community I knew the Commerce Aerospace Sector lead, Robin Tosin. I worked with her extensively. I went to the PNAA and the AFA conferences as often as I could and maintain contact with them, trying to be that connective tissue to bring airports and aerospace and industry together. Tom Dent a few years ago sponsored a bill, and for a limited period of time, a 2-year period, we had the AAAC, the Aviation Aerospace Advisory Committee. He's tried to bring that back, but we haven't been able to bring that back yet. An entity like that would need to be created in order to coordinate this, because industry is very tight-lipped. They keep a lid on things so that they protect their trade secrets. There's got to be a mechanism that aerospace, aviation, airports, and industry, the flying industry, all work together. And I'm not aware here in this state that we have that. I'm seeing in Maryland and Virginia and some other states that they are putting that kind of thing together. So in many cases, I think we're a little bit late to the party.
The Yakima Valley Conference of Governments, our MPO, we began introducing this type of possibility in our 20-year long-range transportation plan 5-6 years ago. We've done some initial surveys with the public, and they are receptive to the concept. Early in his presentation, it was PSRC who did the survey. They're the MPO for the Seattle region. And I think the only airport that is shown on here that is not an MPO and thus requires multimodal transportation planning was Pullman. That wouldn't preclude their regional transportation planning organization doing planning, but it wouldn't just be a heavy lift by these airports to do this planning. You would have these planning organizations being part of that process to bring people to those airports. A personal example I can have to something you suggested. I was returning from Baltimore before COVID. Left there early in the morning, and my director was in Yakima. Needed to go to a meeting in Spokane. By the time he got to Seattle, caught the flight to Spokane, I was back into Seattle for our flight that usually returns to Yakima about 11 o'clock at night. He had been waiting for 5 hours to get from Sea-Tac, which he had gotten on the return flight from Spokane, back in the time I had done all the way back to Baltimore. So that's one example, but you have people traveling currently maybe to Spokane if they can get a flight, maybe to Pasco if they get a flight, or Sea-Tac. It's because they have to. It's not because it's necessarily their preference. So competition, like you mentioned before, maybe not. That they do have those closer locations. It's easier for them to access accessibility to aviation flights because they've got something closer. And based on that, we're looking at how we can support the Yakima Airport if this transpires. So we're already ahead of the game. We have general aviation airport in Sunnyside, which is really just a basic local use airport. But they could then also be a lower valley version that could provide limited flights based on our API around the state, which ultimately, as we say, you're not spending time sitting for hours taking up capacity space at Sea-Tac when you could have already completed your flight and your trip earlier in the day. So that would be something I think each of the MPOs around the state in association with those airports could be working with them, and that helps engage the legislature or the federal government in terms of financing any improvements that we head that direction, and at the same time plan whether it's electric aircraft or aviation or hybrid aircraft as well.
Maria, you have your hand up. Did you have another question?
Yes, I do. I have a follow-up question. I so appreciate the previous comment, and this is more a question to our chair. I'm mindful that we have a report that's going to be going to the legislature, and I'm mindful that our own CAWG group has to make a decision on this. But my sense, listening to this presentation, is that the CAWG will wind up doing a short-term, long-term recommendation ultimately, and that perhaps what we can do is to have an agreement among ourselves that we would like this group to explore what a collaborative thinking planning group would be and come back at the next meeting. And I don't know if that timeline is too short. I would, I'm also thinking about ultimately the utilization of our consultant. I think this is such a heavy lift that preliminary work has to be done even before we can say, okay, let this be part of the consultant's scope of work. And I would appreciate thoughts from the other members of the CAWG, because you know more of how the navigation can happen to bring in a very progressive type of technology into operations, into aviation operations.
My idea was to ask, I think we should, when we're planning in about between a half an hour and an hour, we're planning our next meeting and meetings beyond. Let's put this on the list of things to talk about with the consultant. And then as we're talking about our meetings in 2026, we can plan for both more factual input, fact finding, and then also kind of what you were saying about how a piece within a piece, planning for the short to medium term and planning for the medium to long term.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chair, and it would be good to reflect in a line or two in our report that this is a forward-looking planning that's being done, as opposed to just a simple expansion of an airport. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
We have 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, and then they're going to put the hook and pull me off stage. Anyone else?
Anyone on the line have any other questions?
Okay. Hearing none. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Here, you want to share your screen? Okay.
Okay, so we are pivoting now from Mr. Hauser's presentation to Ms. Work, who is, of course, a member of the CAWG, but is also active with all over Hawaii today. Right.
Well, yeah, I'm just so everybody's aware, I'm not only my CAG member, but I'm retired from the Federal Aviation Administration, and I'm also a vice president of All Aboard Washington, which is a nonprofit organization that's been promoting rail in Washington State for more than 40 years. So there's, for me, I love talking about transportation, both aviation and rail, and I think rail has a part in the book we're talking about here. So, can everybody hear me okay? So, at our July 17th meeting, Maria Batterola asked for some information about rail. And I believe it was Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was in the context of how improved passenger rail service would help relieve some Sea-Tac congestion. So we, after some talking with Ann, we agreed that it would be good to have WashDOT Rail Freight Reports Division provide this briefing today. But because of some scheduling issues, we were not able to do that right now. But they are perfectly willing to brief us at a future meeting. So, Mr. Chair, I suggest that in the first quarter of 2026, that we schedule a meeting, a briefing presentation by WashDOT on rail in Washington State. And I suggest that because the new state rail plan is going to be released in the first quarter of 2026. So it would be an ideal time for them to brief us about what's in that plan. There was a public comment period this summer, and that has closed now, but I've seen the draft of the plan and it's quite encouraging, I think, but I'd rather have them speak to the plan because they're far more familiar with it. So just in general, I think, so this presentation defaulted to me is what I'm saying here. So in general, the CAWG needs to be thinking about how improved rail service, whether that's passenger or freight, can help relieve Sea-Tac air traffic congestion. And hopefully this presentation provides some food for thought on that. So here's a little map that shows what we have today. Can you see my mouse pointer there? You probably can't see my mouse pointer much. It's right there. Yeah, okay. All right. So today in Washington State, we have Amtrak's Empire Builder. This train is a long distance train, goes from Seattle to Chicago and from Portland to Chicago. These trains, it goes from Seattle over Stevens Pass to Spokane, and it goes from Portland up the Columbia River Gorge through Pasco to Spokane. These two trains merge in the middle of the night, about 1 or 2 in the morning, at Spokane, eastbound, and they travel through northern Montana to Minneapolis and Chicago as a single consist. Westbound, they're split at Spokane during the night. Half of the train goes back to Seattle over Stevens Pass, and the other half goes down to Pasco and down the gorge to Vancouver and Portland. Additionally, we have Amtrak's Coast Starlight that operates between Seattle and Los Angeles. That's daily service. And that runs the same route here as the next train, which is the Amtrak Cascades, which runs between Seattle and Vancouver, actually runs between Eugene. Why did I put Seattle in there? It runs between Eugene, Oregon, and Vancouver, BC, via Portland and Seattle. And now the red line you see here is Burlington Northern Santa Fe tracks that used to have passenger rail service, but it was discontinued in 1981. And that's from Seattle to Auburn, over Stampede Pass, Helensburgh, Yakima, Pasco, and Seattle. So as we talk about passenger rail service, there are 2 different types. And the significance is huge because long distance service is federally funded, and any routes that are 750 miles or less between the endpoints are state funded. So, and I'll use the Amtrak Cascades as an example if any of you have ridden that. The train sets themselves, the locomotives and coaches, are owned by WashDOT and ODOT. The tracks are owned by Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and WashDOT and ODOT pay Burlington Northern Santa Fe for the use of those tracks. And the trains themselves are operated by Amtrak crews under contract to WashDOT and ODOT. So it's perhaps arguably a little bit of a complicated arrangement. Amtrak currently operates 15 long distance routes that range from 760 to 2,500 miles. The route from Vancouver to BC and to Eugene is 476. So the bipartisan infrastructure law, which you may be familiar with, was signed into law by President Biden in 2021. That law, and incidentally, you don't worry about these numbers that you see on here, and I expect you to be able to read them, but I'm providing all these slides to Christina, so if you want to see these and look at them, you can do it later. But basically, the bipartisan infrastructure law provides $66 billion for passenger and freight rail over a 5-year period. It's the largest investment in passenger rail since Amtrak's creation 50 years ago. It provides unprecedented federal funding for rail improvement projects, and includes $66 billion in advanced appropriations from FY22 through FY26. So 2 important aspects of the bipartisan infrastructure law affect Central Washington. First of all is Section 22214, which required the Secretary of Transportation to conduct a study about the restoration of Amtrak long-distance routes, many of which were discontinued in the 70s and early 80s. And that study, both Alan and I participated on over a 2-year period. And we'll get to the results of that in just a minute here. The other section that affects us here in Washington is the Secretary was required to establish a program to facilitate the development of rail corridors, and both long distance and state sponsored, incidentally. So there's one of those, and all of these the long distance study that was required here by 22214 was presented to Congress in 2025, and here's a link to it. It's 130 pages long, so I'm not going to read it to you, but it has a lot of interesting information in there.
We got time. We're running ahead of schedule, right? So here is, this is the current long distance route situation. Well, current passenger rail route situation. The brown lines are long distance, and the blue lines are state-sponsored routes that are less than 50 miles. So you can see the blue line there from Seattle down to Eugene, and that goes up to Vancouver, BC. And the brown line there you see that goes through Spokane, and what they have Kennewick on here is actually past. So, but that's the Empire Builder that we talked about earlier. It goes to Seattle. So the long distance study that Federal Railroad Administration did came up with a recommendation of 15 preferred routes for restoration. And these are in the report to Congress that I just showed you there. The purple line affects us. This is what was called the North Coast Hiawatha that was discontinued in 1979, and then this route continued to operate through Yakima as the Empire Builder until 1981. So this purple route is one of them that's being recommended for a recommendation. So the bipartisan infrastructure law provided, well, basically resulted in 69 projects that were awarded $500,000 each under the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification and Development Program to begin restoration of these projects. 3 of these 69 grants directly affect passenger rail in Washington State. 2 of these grants were awarded to WashDOT. The first grant was in December of 2023 to assist in preparation of what's called a service development plan for the Amtrak Cascades. A service development plan is a detailed plan of everything from sidings to platforms to stations to trains, coaches, and whatnot. Everything that's needed to develop a service. It's called a service development plan. WashDOT completed the preliminary service development plan for the Cascades in June of 2024, and it's the foundation for additional work on the service development plan. So the second grant that WashDOT received was for high-speed rail service between Vancouver, BC, and Portland, Oregon. Now, $500,000 is not a big sum. The idea is to be seed money so that you can start long-range planning, if you will, for high-speed rail service. Subsequent to this $500,000 grant that WashDOT received, they also received a second grant for high-speed rail, which is $49.7 million. They received in December of 2024. And then they also received $5.5 million in state matching funds from the Washington State Legislature. So these funds will support the next phase of the work, including technical work and community and partner engagement to look at the market and potential leadership, ridership, route options, and service options, which is something we want to talk about here in just a minute.
because this is probably not even as far along as light rail in Payne Field. So if we want to talk about how this thing might access Sea-Tac, this is probably a good time to start that conversation. So the third grant of $500,000 went to the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority of Montana to begin preparation of restoration in Chicago to Seattle service. This is the purple line I showed you in a slide earlier. And there's lots of numbers on these slides that I don't intend to walk you through, but these are the criteria that Federal Railroad Administration used to come up with a preferred recommended route. This route is over 2,000 miles long and it spans 7 states. So Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority applied to FRA to be a sponsor of this particular route, and they received a $500,000 grant to do that. Here's some more numbers that pertain to that route. And it has some more criteria on here that kind of show how the FRA picked this particular route. And to tell you the truth, one of the reasons that this route shows from Kennewick, Yakima, Seattle is because there was a large number of comments that were submitted to FRA about Yakima. And then there's the fact that this route crosses the Yakima Nation, which was one of the restoring passenger rail service to tribal nations was one of the criteria that they used. But you can look at these later. I'm not going to walk you through all of those. This is another one. This particular one is has the costs. Now these costs are Federal Railroad Administration estimates, and I don't know if you can see those numbers or not very well, but if you add up those numbers, they total up to about $3 billion to restore this route from Chicago to Seattle. The term vehicle costs here that you see refers to locomotives and coaches. The station maintenance costs, facility costs, that's stations, platforms, and a maintenance facility where they can move all the trains or the coaches and locomotives and whatnot. So this is another one that you can look at later and pick out some numbers, and as is this slide, which shows how the FRA has envisioned that this route would operate and where it would stop and what time of day and that sort of thing. And you can look at this later or look at it on these are slides, incidentally. A lot of these are, you can see down the right hand corner. I just plagiarized these out of the FRA's long distance service study. So now let's talk for a minute about the Amtrak Cascades. This is the Washtenaw sponsored the service that runs between Vancouver, BC and Eugene. Washtenaw is in the process of receiving 8 new train sets that are fully funded. In fact, the first one was just delivered about maybe 3 weeks ago out of the factory in Elk Grove, California, just south of Sacramento, the Siemens plant there. He's a manufacturer. And this train was physically moved to Pueblo, Colorado about 3 weeks ago, where it's undergoing testing right now. And there are 7 more train sets to follow. This train set that's in Pueblo right now is going to be moved to the Northeast corridor between Boston and Washington, D.C. for additional training. And these train sets are expected to enter service hopefully in time for the World Cup by next summer. Incidentally, these train sets are not high-speed rail. They'll operate at 79 miles an hour or sometimes less because of speed limitations on BNSF track and other train traffic. both freight and passenger. And here is a picture of the train actually being moved to Pueblo. And here's a view of some of the interior seating. Incidentally, these particular trains are not the same as the long distance trains. Amtrak is in the procurement process for procuring new long distance trains. The shorter trains, these state-sponsored trains, don't have quite the same amenities. They're certainly nice, but they don't have, for example, sleeping accommodations, which the longer the long distance trains do. So now let's jump a little bit to high speed rail. There's many definitions of high speed rail. FRA sets the Federal Railroad Administration sets train speed limits based on signaling systems in use and the class of track. And there are 9 classes of track in the United States with various requirements. Class 4 track is the con, which allows speeds up to 80 miles an hour. So high-speed rail right now in California is under construction, and this will be operated on a Class 9 track, which means it'll have speeds up to 220 miles an hour. The red lines here, or purple lines, are under construction. You guys maybe are aware of this, or maybe not, but between Las Vegas and what is that? Rancho Cucamonga, I think, is the terminus for it right now. That one is under construction. It's called Bright Line West. It's not going to be Amtrak. It's not the state of California. The other line there between Bakersfield and Merced and between San Jose and San Francisco are currently under construction, have been for quite a few years, incidentally. And here's an example of what's going on with the California high-speed rail. And I have 3 or 4 slides like this, just kind of to show you why this stuff isn't cheap. I mean, people talk about it being expensive. Well, so is building a new airport. But this gets very pricey. In high-speed rail, basically you have 3 options. You can either elevate the tracks, or you can tunnel, or you can have extreme fencing if you're going to be, but you cannot have at-grade crossings. Obviously, you can't have cattle, automobiles, people, you name it, crossing the right of way, because these trains are going over 200 miles an hour and they can't stop. Here you'll see on the left here, this particular bridge looks like an interstate highway bridge, but California is going to start laying track later this year, but it's too late. They haven't paid any track. This is the same bridge. This is an artist's rendition. You can see there's a high-speed train on there, but they haven't gotten there yet. Close, but not quite. Here's another slide that shows just what makes this complicated and pricey. Another one. Here's another bridge. Looks like it's a bridge to nowhere. There's more than 50 of these right now in the Central Valley of California. But most of these are going to be connected here very soon. The High-Speed Rail Authority in California is anticipating to start service January 1st of 32. So it's 6 years from now. So this is an interesting little slide I wanted to show you. This is an artist's rendition, but is actually of a real building. This is the Transbase Transit Center at San Francisco. It's also called the Salesforce Transit Center. It's 1,430 feet long and it sits 1 block south of Market Street. Currently, it serves as a primary bus terminal for the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's designed to accommodate future high-speed rail. If you can see, there's 5 levels here: high-speed rail for local transit connections. The ground floor with entrances, retail space, and ticketing. The second floor has retail space, food hall, offices, and bus ticket counter, and a waiting room. And the bus deck has bus bays surrounding the central waiting area. And then there's a 5.4 acre rooftop park. Now, the reason I put this up here is let your mind wander for a minute and pretend that this is Sea-Tac. And this could be either a tremendously overhauled parking garage at Sea-Tac, or it could be a replacement for the existing parking garage. So as you look at this, down here on the bottom floor, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but this would be light rail connections and high-speed rail. The next one up would probably be baggage claim. The next one up would probably be passenger drop-off on the left side or the right side, or you could have these divided up by specific airlines, and so they kind of breaks up just drive it up there to anywhere. The next route, the next one up would be buses, and probably hotel and parking shuttle. And then on top of that, you have an outdoor park where people can sit and wait for their airplane or whatever. So here's a couple of photos. This thing actually exists, and here's how it looks. This is the bus level. And this is another picture of the escalator inside. It's quite a nice facility. And here's the parking area up top. Would be possible to do this at Sea-Tac. You just have to think out of the box a little bit. So, thinking high-speed rail and 200 miles an hour or so, here's some times potentially between different cities that I just picked out of nowhere to show you how it might be possible to get from some of these places what we might be thinking about building a new airport or using an existing airport, expanding an existing airport. So, for example, you could get from Yakima to Sea-Tac in 47 minutes at 200 miles an hour. If you're going to Bellevue, you could probably have a stop there. You could probably knock 10 minutes off from there or so. Now, to get this in perspective, I look at Sheldon in 21 minutes. Yeah, that's reasonable, probably. Centralia, 22 minutes. Moses Lake, a little bit longer, as is Spokane. But think about this for a minute. The Denver airport opened in 1995. It's 25 miles northeast of downtown Denver. It was built out in the middle of nowhere. They had lots of land available, something that we don't quite have the privilege of having here now. But a light rail train now departs Denver Airport every 15 to 20 minutes during the day, and light rail will get you to downtown Denver's Union Station in 37 minutes. So compare that to some of the numbers that are on here. Now, it's not high-speed rail, it's light rail, but nevertheless, lots of people ride light rail and survive those 30 minutes to get to downtown Denver. Now, if you're going to Tokyo, for example, and you're flying into Narita Airport, it's a 1 hour ride by taxi or bus from Narita to downtown Tokyo. And it's going to be longer if you take their train. This is my last slide. This happens to be a picture of the new Amtrak Acela train sets that were just delivered last month and are now operated on the northeast corridor. These trains operate at top speed of 160 miles an hour and slower in some areas because of track conditions. But this is the closest thing that we have currently in the United States that you could call a high-speed rail. When the California system comes online and Brightline, those will be 200-mile-an-hour trains. So that's my last slide. So I'm open to questions if anybody has any. The purpose of this was just to get us thinking a little bit about, as has been said before, how do you move people rapidly from Puget Sound area to and from some of these other locations where we might have a new airport or use an expanded existing airport. This is technology that exists. Takes some money and it takes some time, but it also costs money to build a new airport. So, yeah, thank you. Questions?
I have a question. I'll pick your brain from your railroad experience. Question was brought up on the Seattle to Chicago. It's going to take 2 days to get from one end to the other. Why would somebody want to take 2 days when they can be in Chicago in 5-6 hours?
That's a good question. First of all, I'll say that most people do not take the train from Seattle to Chicago. The average length of a traveler on Amtrak's long distance trains is about 490 miles. So people get in on and off these trains as the train goes. Now there's sleeping accommodations for those who elected to have that service, so you can go all the way from Seattle to Chicago. I've done it. I mean, some people do, but you know, you don't want to be in a hurry. If you're in a hurry, you're going to fly. But I can say the train is relaxing. You can get up, move around. You can have a full sit-down dinner. You have sleeping accommodations if you choose those. So it's a relaxing experience. I think there'll always be a few people who do that, but like I said, most of them don't. Most people it's 490 miles average.
I think I see the high-speed rail from Vancouver down to Portland being extremely important to the work we're doing in relieving congestion. Do we have the ability to get any numbers on passengers taking rail now? And is there any impact on, I mean, is that even relieving the Sea-Tac pressure? Because I'm guessing if you want to go rail, you're just going to choose rail. I mean, that would not even be, I think, my third option. If I'm wanting to go somewhere, maybe it's because I'm just not a rail guy. You know, I looked at taking it to Portland and it just didn't make sense due to the time. I mean, it's not like a plane that's leaving every hour you can get on and go. It's very specific, kind of weird times. And to me, it's almost, I'm not supposed to drive to Portland unless I specifically want a relaxing, scenic drive or, you know, ride on a train. How does that non-high-speed rail really link to kind of relieving that pressure? Yeah.
Well, right now there are 6 Amtrak Cascade trains daily between Seattle and Portland. And then there's the Coast Starlight, so that's the 7th one. So there's 7 trains each day. You kind of have to remember that when you take the train, you're going to arrive at the train station 5 or 10 minutes before departure and get on. If you're going to go from Seattle to Portland, you need to show up 2 hours in advance. So you have to measure between A and B and the dead time that you have there, typically in Seattle. I looked at Spokane's website yesterday, even they tell everybody to show up 2 hours in advance.
Well, that's generally everyone, just because that's what the airlines say, and the airports can't say different than the airlines. Because if there's an issue, passengers then look at the airport and say, well, you said I could be here 45 minutes before my flight. So that's standard language, 2 hours. I think most people that look at the system and know when they can get in and out of their local airports efficiently.
There are ridership numbers, but we can get those for you.
We need to see just
WashDOT can provide those when they give us our briefing in the spring. I know, I remember that. I don't want to say that because I don't remember the exact riders, but I've heard Jason Biggs give those to us before, but they change all the time. But I know prior to the pandemic, there was something like a 60% fare box recovery on the Amtrak Cascades. So the ridership is pretty decent. That's better than some other public transportation systems.
And that's north-south, not east.
That's right. That's just between, north south.
Yeah, anecdotally, that core Empire Cascade, Seattle, Portland, slightly over 3 hours now, six times a day. I'm setting aside the Coast Starlight because it runs so late so often. But now you're at that many trips per day each direction. And then when you factor in traffic on I-5 or the need to arrive at the airport some in advance of a short flight, and then the fact that you're going to Portland for the day you land out at Portland Airport, and then you got to take their light rail in. It's my prior job used to travel a fair amount between Seattle and Portland, and it was always like, am I gonna, depending on exactly where I'm going, am I gonna fly, take the train, or drive? Now that so many more train trips per day, that probably moves the needle in favor of the train.
And if it was a high-speed train, that would probably really smooth the needle.
Exactly. If it's that, so the Cascadia high-speed rail, that would be dedicated right away.
Yeah.
And faster.
I can say about that, having reviewed Washington's draft new rail plan, that there's several options in there for the Cascades. One of them I think is going to be in the final draft. Don't quote me on this one. They're thinking about planning for 13 trips a day round trip between Seattle and Portland. And the service development plan that I mentioned for the Cascades is going to include various improvements to speed up that travel time now between Seattle and Portland. There are some, for example, I know they're in the process of building a new platform at Centralia. They're putting in crossovers, improve some sightings, and with various infrastructure improvement projects like that to speed up the service. But nevertheless, they're pretty much limited to 79 miles an hour because it gets really complicated when you start getting passenger trains on tracks behind a 50-mile-an-hour freight train ahead of you. So it creates complications for BNSF to put anything higher than about 90 miles an hour.
But a dedicated high speed could change the game.
Yes. Traffic. A high speed, by definition, has to have restricted brand new right of way. That's what makes it kind of expensive. But you've got to go out and acquire all this land. You have to do environmental impact studies. And the thing has to be elevated or tunneled. And incidentally, the cost of tunneling in 2020 dollars is $400 million per mile. And in the case of the high-speed service between Vancouver, BC, and Portland, it's been estimated that it will require 80 miles of tunneling at $400 million. And that's just in that area. And I think the reason for most of that 80 miles is to go under places like Tacoma and Seattle and Everett and whatnot. It's cheaper to do that, I think. Kind of like the Alaskan Viaduct. You just dig a hole rather than build another elevated section to it. Yeah, that's what makes it expensive.
Representative Fine, do you have a question?
Yeah, I see a couple hands up there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Please.
Yeah. So I have some history here with the high-speed rail, and I guess my couple of cautions. I mean, the legislature did provide some money to take a look at this, given the availability of federal dollars, just like we are looking at enhancements to the Amtrak Cascades route. This is a proposal that comes from advocates with a solution. I would suggest that you folks focus like you are with potential airport improvements, new airport needs as solving a problem that needs to be addressed. I appreciate the comments about what the cost is. And if you take a look at what's happened in California, you'll see, especially if the state picks up a responsibility like this, how the costs can get way out of hand. This is, I believe that the problem, if there is a problem with transportation between Portland and Vancouver, BC, it's a different problem about what we're trying to respond to in terms of our aviation needs in the state of Washington. Much broader situation, different kind of solutions. This is a fixed solution, fixed route solution. And we've had good discussion that I have heard today about different ways of solving this. The advantage of airport construction, while it does need to have access, the routes can be very flexible. Once a high-speed rail is a fixed route at a high speed, and the more stops you have, the less it becomes high speed. And it is basically a straight line construction, either in greenfields or tunneling. So that's not to say that this might be in the future for the state, but I think it's good to remind folks that these are different problems. High-speed rail is not going to solve our airport access and travel. It may solve a bit of it, but it doesn't solve the airport needs are much broader. So just wanted to throw that in, and happy to have more conversations. Sorry I can't be there in person. I appreciate the quality of the presentation that's just been made. It was very good. But as I said, it's a different problem that high-speed rail chooses to solve than the airport needs for the state of Washington. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I think Charlie had his hand up at some point.
Yeah, I did have my hand up, and I was just curious. Years ago when I was with the state of Texas as an airport planner with the city of Houston, they had plans to look at high-speed rail between San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas, and you know, I still don't think they've gone anywhere with that. But that I've kind of just wanted to ask the question: what other states do have high-speed rail? Thank you.
California, for sure. I mean, well, they don't have it yet, but it's under construction. And I'd have to look, that route between Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth has been on again and off again. And I actually don't know what the status of that one is now. And then you have Bright Line in Florida. And then, of course, you have the Amtrak Acela in the Northeast corridor of the United States that goes from Boston to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. That's not high speed, is it?
It's 160 up to 160 miles an hour. So again, as on your definition of high speed.
Well, okay. Thank you.
There's another question there I see from Mr. Hitt.
No, that's a public. I assume they're raising their hand for public comment.
Okay.
Public comment. Are we?
So we're
Right on time. Are we?
right on time, huh?
Right on time.
Anything else?
All right. Well, thank you for work.
Okay. We will now start the public comment portion of this meeting. We have 30 minutes for public comment, and each person has 2 minutes to speak. If at the end of 2 minutes you go over, I will state your 2 minutes are over and ask that you please wrap up your comment. I will alternate back and forth between in-person and online Zoom public comment. If you would like to comment and you're online, please use the hand raise tool in the reaction section of Zoom. And those in person can form a line. So I'll start with someone in person. If anyone in person wants to go first, go ahead. Can you go to the front? That way the speaker can hear you.
So I'm Patricia Byers, Mayor of City of Yakima. I've been following this over time, as Alan knows and Rob knows. I do think that passenger rail and our airport situation can complement each other and work very well. And so I just keep watching and hoping for our opportunity. But also, I want to comment on the last speaker who shared that high-speed rail may not be the answer in Washington State. I grew up in California. I know what those, hundreds of miles of flat land are about, and we don't have that here. We have mountains and other things like that really prevent, I think, effective high-speed rail coming from one side of the state to the other. I'll just leave it at it. Thank you very much. You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
All right, online, Steven, I will ask you to unmute.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Steve Vittner. I work for the Port of Seattle. My team and I handle and oversee all of the airline scheduling, gate planning, and capacity planning for the airport. And it's my first time joining this meeting, and it's been a very intriguing conversation, great presentations, interesting presentations to kind of see what the direction is for this group. What I've been drawn to is sort of the direction this group is going in as far as trying to handle the capacity for the airport, looking for different answers, resolutions to handle the capacity for this airport, finding different solutions, whether it's high-speed rail, a secondary airport. And it all seems to me that it's a 10 to 20 year outlook, right? Because the need for infrastructure, locations, and whatnot, and looking at our capacity planning, we are in need of resolutions near term in basically in a 5-year plan. And when we're looking at solutions, that's where I would hope this group is looking towards finding resolutions in a more near term solution rather than long term, because the more long term you're looking, that's when the capacity is going to be hitting and where we're not going to be able to support the growth and the infrastructure here at the airport, given what we are doing on a day-to-day basis, whether that's high-speed rail, which is going to take a long time, searching for a secondary airport, which is going to take a long, long time. We need solutions in a near-term 2 to 5 year outlook rather than long-term. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in person that would like to make a public comment?
I go around too.
I mean, that's up to the chair.
I mean, I don't see there's no line.
So this is Patricia Byers, Mayor of Yakima again, and I appreciate the last speaker's focus on the short-term solution to what we're facing in the very near future. And I know that our airport directors worked a great deal on looking at the use of community airports, connecting to one another and then getting people into the Seattle or Portland area. And I just think I love the idea of railroad because I like riding on the train. I think in the future it's going to be very effective, but I think the shorter term solution is going to be smaller community airport for some of that resolution.
Thank you. Anyone else online?
Yes, there's quite a few. So next online is Brett.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm Dr. Breck Lebeg, with co-chair of Physicians for Social Responsibility, the Climate and Health Task Force. Chair Norby and members, thank you for the opportunity to comment. WPSR doctors work to understand and advise on health effects of transport policy. As an Air Force flight surgeon for 30 years, aerospace medicine and public health specialist, I was an aircraft mishap investigator. I deployed multiple times and have thousands of hours of flight time in military airplanes. I love flying. But during and after my service, I also came to learn the health harms of fossil-fueled aircraft. It shifts the risks to health and insurance systems for medical treatment. As I stated to you in my testimony last May, we must limit PM 2.5 fuel particles that cause heart disease, lung disease, cancer, and dementia. Recall the UW study that found 2 to 5 years shorter lifespan by those living near Sea-Tac. A mode shift from fuel-hungry planes and millions of vehicles on lanes onto fuel-efficient trains is the healthy choice. I was delighted to hear the opportunity today of electric planes on distributed service. Because transport is a system of systems, your mission statement requires that aviation be considered in context, not isolation. We must weigh the risk-benefit ratio of each mode, not just to commerce, but also to our most important resource, our people. As a delegate to the Washington State Medical Association meeting this Saturday, I will introduce a resolution to limit aviation harm by fuel by limiting airport expansion, limiting new airports, and limiting short-haul flights, starting with those 40 flights per day from Sea-Tac to both PDX and Vancouver. The intent is not to stop moving people and goods where they're needed. It's to not make them sick in that process. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'd be honored to join your group as you make these choices. Thank you.
Okay, up next online, Brandon.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm glad to turn on video if you like as well. Thanks for letting me quickly comment. First, my name's Brandon Bowersox Johnson, and I co-lead a team at 350 Seattle that looks at aviation and transportation issues. So the first thing I want to say is a big thank you for taking this look at rail and aviation. And these multimodal ways of looking are more work than if you just kind of looked at one piece of the puzzle. But this is really an important service you all are doing for everyone here in Washington State to figure out, how different modes could be a solution. One brief point I want to just make, I'm excited that I think rail can be a solution to help address the Sea-Tac airport congestion and the highway congestion. And as a couple of previous speakers said, I actually think in the next 5 years, rail, by improving cascades, can be a near-term solution to address that airport congestion. I worked with a group of volunteers doing a report about some of the short-haul flights that can already be served by rail that are a lot of short-haul flights out of Sea-Tac. Big destinations like Seattle to Vancouver, BC, or Seattle to Portland. Each of those has more than 100 flights incoming and outgoing every single day between Seattle, Portland, and Seattle, Vancouver, BC. And yet those are served by trains. And high-speed rail someday might provide super fast service there, but actually in the next 5 years, WashDOT already is planning for how to improve the Cascade service and go up to something like 14 trains a day between Seattle, Portland. So having hourly trains, like somebody said, well, I tried to take it and the trains aren't leaving every hour. Well, actually, WashDOT's plan is that they would be leaving every hour. So we have in the near term a way to improve our rail system like the Cascades route that already exists that can dramatically give people more transportation choices rather than just getting in an airplane or taking the highway. So I hope you'll consider these multimodal questions and ask which of these routes really are near-term solutions. The report that we have coming out, I'll be glad to share it when it does, that finds something like 600 flights every single week are to these short destinations already served by rail. So I'll share that report and I'll follow along your work. Thank you very much for asking these multimodal questions and looking at the way that rail can be a solution to our congested aviation network and to our highway bottlenecks as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Ursula.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm unable to undo myself on the camera, but can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I very much agree with what my name is Ursula Euler. I'm a resident in Thurston County. I have been deeply involved in aviation planning since 2021 or so when the first CAWG began its work. I feel that I'm very knowledgeable about the topic and have learned a lot over the years. And I'm learning more about rail and rail transportation in the US, and I'm delighted that to hear what the previous two speakers have spoken about, that rail can be a solution to transportation, to public transportation. Aviation is not public transportation. I say that because about 5 to 6 people out of 10 in a year don't even fly. So it is only, the average person flies about once every 2 years. I don't call that public transportation. And to do some math, Washington has about 8.1 million residents right now. This is from the Office of Financial Management, the official keeper of population projections. Of that 8.1 million, those are people of all ages, young and old, of all economic status, well-to-do versus just getting along. If we just assume that half of them are in a position to be able to afford to fly, we are talking about 4 million in Washington. And if those 4 million each fly once every other year, where are these projections of aviation growth coming from? I think that should be looked at very closely. The number I gave you about how many people fly in a year comes from a Gallup poll. I consider that an independent and credible source. I do not consider the FAA as a objective source of projections because the demand that is being projected seems out of line. It seems way too high. It is not geared towards Washington and Washington population. So where does it come from? And that would be a root cause to address and to find out if aviation expansion is really the answer, or if there are other answers in the wings, such as perhaps airports need to collaborate. Maybe Vancouver, British Columbia, and Portland airports and Sea-Tac need to collaborate in order to take pressure off of Sea-Tac. Perhaps cargo can go from Yakima to the metropolitan area of Seattle, for example. Cargo transportation, even of perishable items, can be much restructured. Those are all solutions that should be looked at very closely, but particularly.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ursula, your 2 minutes was up, so we're gonna move on. Next up is Arvia.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, Arvina, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much for the presentations. I'm Arvia Morris. I'm a volunteer with Climate Rail Alliance, and I advocate for passenger rail as a means to alleviate congestion at our airports and freeways. As with regional airports, this strategy would use infrastructure we already have and is already moving people along our congested I-5 corridor and to some extent east-west across the state. Vastly improving our regional passenger rail network in the state could be done in 5 to 10 years if it's prioritized as a central piece of our transportation strategy. Many commercial flights out of Sea-Tac are local short-haul flights to Portland and Vancouver, BC. In addition, there are flights to Spokane and cities in Montana, just to name some of the east-west destinations. We hope you will join with rail advocates in supporting funding for federal match grants to maximize ridership on Amtrak Cascades route and develop east-west routes. To maximize ridership, we must have reliable as well as frequent and faster service. Currently, poor on-time performance and infrequent trips hold back Washington and the Pacific Northwest. We know this can be improved. Other states have services that are greater than 90% on time. Between Seattle and Portland, with 13 to 16 reliable round trips per day in the new Arrow train sets, each train set holds 350 seats. We could be moving, and if we had 13 to 16 round trips per day, we could be moving 8 to 10,000 people per day along the I-5 corridor. And with 6 round trips between Seattle and Vancouver, BC, we could be moving 4,000 passengers per day. Together, Amtrak Cascade serves 18 communities. So it's not just big city to big city, it's also serving smaller communities in between. Long distance east-west service is also important. My daughter spent 3 days at the airport trying to get from Seattle to Bozeman a few years ago when Alaska Air was having issues with de-icing. I've also spent the night at the airport when things have just gotten canceled. So we need alternatives where possible. The train service, if she'd used the train service, she would have gotten to her new job in Bozeman on time and been ready to work. It is time to have a high priority for investing in intercity passenger rail to address our transportation needs and our pollution problems. Hope you will join us in switching to more frequent, reliable trains as a component of solving our transportation challenges, and this can be done in the short term. Please take a good look at Amtrak Cascades and how it can be improved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Rhonda.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Larson Kramer. First off, I want to recommend an amazing podcast called Reconnect America. It is about the history of rail and the future of rail and how to get there. And I love it, and you will love it as well. I recommend Reconnect America. Next, I want to respond to the idea that rail is somehow solving a different problem from aviation. It isn't. It's the same problem. How to move people efficiently, affordably, and sustainably. Aviation comes with noise and pollution, long security lines, and no legroom. Rail, by contrast, connects city centers, reduces emissions, and provides reliable service for the very trips where planes are least efficient, the 100 to 500 mile routes. I've also heard the claim today that mountains make high-speed rail impractical in Washington state, but that is also not the case. Japan's Shinkansen crosses mountain ranges, Europe's systems run through the Alps, and China has built high-speed rail through terrain far more challenging than the Cascades. The technology is proven. We know how to use tunnels, bridges, and careful routing. The real obstacle isn't our geography, it's political will. So let's be clear, high-speed rail is not something separate future advocates dream. It's a direct solution to the same transportation problem we're facing with aviation. If we invest in it, we'll join the rest of the world in giving people a cleaner, more efficient choice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Louise or Louis.
Louise.
Louise. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is Luis Mozo. I'm the Affairs Director for All Aboard Washington, a C3 nonprofit that promotes passenger rail. I'm certainly glad to hear all the discussion about rail here today. As a former representative, vice chair of the House Transportation Committee, along with my colleague, Jake Fye, he knows my interest in passenger rail. But as we all know, this work group was put together to look at aviation, as the representative has reminded us, and the intermodal connectivity with rail, of course, is extremely important. I'm very glad that that discussion is taking place in your work group. I just wanted to add one thing. Somebody had asked a question before, why would someone spend 2 days on the train from Chicago to Seattle? And I think that adding to my friend Gary's remarks, that there is data from Amtrak that I'm aware of that only 10% of the riders on the Empire Builder do the whole route. That most of these are city pairs between smaller distances, a couple hundred miles here and there. And looking at a lot of the rural area that the Empire Builder covers, this is extremely important that they have that service, because they've got to go hundreds of miles just to get to an airport, and not even a major airport at that. The other benefit, of course, to Washington State is that this long-distance rail, which is currently being studied by the FRA, and WashDOT is a partner in that study, will go a long way to addressing a promise that the state made 32 years ago to have passenger rail service to eastern Washington. And once that service through the North Hiawatha was canceled by Amtrak back, I think, in 1980 or so. So here's an opportunity where if that long distance service picks up at the expense of the federal government operating and in building it, that we would be then get that intercity service that was expanded back in 1993 in statute now. The other thing that I'm keenly aware of, having wanted to use passenger rail to get to Olympia when I was a legislator, is that the times don't work, but there are additional service coming up in the future. And the time it takes to get to Sea-Tac, wait around through security, get on the plane and fly to Portland, let's say, is not much different than if you got on the train at King Street Station and went down that way. So most people don't seem to know that or understand that. They think it's faster on the plane. Yeah, once you get on the plane. I just wanted to point out, I love the fact that you're looking at these intermodal connections, passenger rail, intercity, and things like that. And it's important, your discussions about, recommending how the next better aviation takes place, that looking at making sure modal connection is extremely important to keep that in view as you're doing it, because people have to get to the airport. And when 30% of people in Washington State do not drive, then there has to be some other public service available for them to get to the airport if that's the best mode of transportation available to them. Thanks again for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Nicole.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you today? Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
My name is Lieutenant. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Nicole Blecka. I work with Headquarters Air Force Military Civil Aviation Integration Division. I know the idea of joint use of McCord was a discussion point earlier today, and I know it has been brought up in previous meetings. Each military service has a process for evaluating joint use proposal and navigating joint use. For the Air Force, the process to initiate consideration for joint use of an Air Force airfield requires that a formal proposal must be submitted to the installation commander by a state or local government agency eligible to sponsor a public airport. I would say from the Air Force perspective, at any location, we would not be able to take a position on joint use until we receive a formal proposal and we're able to evaluate and determine feasibility as it pertains to military operations. A request at a joint base like Joint Base Lewis-McChord would be handled slightly differently between the Army and the Air Force. But as it was noted in the agenda items earlier, if there is a request for additional information or briefings from the DoD, it is recommended to reach out to the DoD leaders and make an official request with what specifically is being asked or what additional information is required. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we have one more online. JJ.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I wasn't really going to speak today. I didn't have any prepared notes, but once viewing the rail presentation, which was really great, and especially great to see it at a CAW meeting, I was really inspired to speak. I am, like so many other people, a great proponent of rail because rail is really about moving people. I disagree with Representative Fay on that we have two problems that need solved. I think we have a problem that needs to be solved, and that's moving people and goods, everywhere they can go. And when you talk about things like train stations, they're low impact. When you talk about an airport that needs built or expanded even, now that we know the kinds of particulate pollution that's occurred, the UW study, it's not going to be easy to build an airport. As you know, there's 3 of us at least on here from Thurston County who I think we're all involved in the CAC process. In fact, I had some very spirited, good emails back and forth with Rob Hodgman during that process. And I think that you're not going to get airports built these days. They're very, very invasive, aggressive, loud, and polluting. And so train stations are wonderful for moving people. You can build them fairly quickly. You can have new routes. You can have new cities that get serviced. Moving people on the ground and moving freight on the ground is the future. It should have been our future a long time ago. I've traveled over 60 countries, and not one that I've been to, and many are much less developed than us, not one that I've been to didn't have a developed rail system that moved people, and it moved all sorts of people everywhere, every direction, with all kinds of terrain. So I really want to be a proponent for rail here, and I also want to say one more thing, and that's that you have a generation coming up that I think have a lot more anxiety, for a good reason, than many of the generations that you've been servicing over the last few decades with aviation and rail. And I think a lot more people are making the choice to want to stay on the ground. I have a 26-year-old friend who just took the route from Seattle or from Olympia to all the way to New York City just to see her family because she is too anxious to get on an airplane now. And that's true for many people I know personally. So I think we're increasing a time where people really don't want to fly as much. And I think they want, options that are safe and environmentally sensitive, environmentally sustainable. Climate's a big, huge issue now. People don't fly because they don't want to, they don't want to get an airplane for the climate impact. So you have a lot of different issues coming together, but rail is the way to move people. I really encourage you to coordinate this agency, this effort, this work group with, WishStat's absolute state plans so that we focus on rail really moving people, and air being something that obviously continues, but done in a much more progressive and limited way. And you definitely be taking quite a bit of impact off of the airports, the mega airports that exist, if you had rail that could move them instead. So thanks for listening.
Perfect. Thank you all for participating. And just a reminder, the members of the public can always leave a public comment on the website under the contact tab. So this concludes the public comment today, and I'll turn it over back to Evan.
Mr. Chair, before we talk about today's, just a couple of points, if I could, from some of the comments. I think it would be worthwhile for either our consultant when we bring them on board, or if the capability is easier for someone from WashDOT, to pull out all of the study information from the previous look at this, because what I'm hearing is there appears to be a little bit of a misunderstanding of what the problem is we're solving. And the analysis that was done was very credible. It's not made up stuff. It was full actual numbers. Is that the majority, so if you're solving the Sea-Tac overcapacity problem, the majority of those travelers are domestic. So there was concern back when the sighting of a new greenfield, I think they're saying it's new international airport. It's not. When we look at the percentage of travelers that fly through Sea-Tac, international is relatively small. The percentage of travelers that fly between Seattle and Portland or Seattle and Vancouver, BC is relatively small. The percentage of travelers that fly from central Washington, eastern Washington, to Sea-Tac or connect through Sea-Tac is relatively small. What we're solving for, the vast majority of the travelers are origin destination Seattle, and they have domestic destinations, not regional. They're not going to Portland. They're not going to Boise. They're going to the other side of the country. And so I think if someone can access that data, it will clarify, because I love the idea of rail too, but I do agree with Brett Fox. It's not the same problem we're solving for. Yes, I agree with many of these speakers. Rail between Seattle and Portland, absolutely. Rail to solve all the domestic destinations, that's a national effort. It's going to take decades to create that kind of rail system. So that's my first thought, is it would be worthwhile either for someone to WashDOT reach out to the consultants if they don't have the information, or when we get our consultant on board, so that we can be very clear that the problem we're solving for is OND Seattle domestic travel. The second point, and this is just anecdotal, when we originally were considering McCord Field as a possible opportunity, it doesn't really impact the Army. This notion of a public entity was just a conversation that we've had. And it's best practice that the best public entity to own and operate an airport is a port district. He's a port district. He's a port district. That's the best entity. So as we explored, well, where if we were to do some kind of joint use of McCord Field, who would be the best entity? Nobody ever had a conversation with them, so this is just kind of off the cuff. It'd be a port.
If I can comment, I may disagree slightly that I don't believe a port district is necessarily the best. I think it is a very good one, but I think the true best management of an airport is probably an airport authority that has been appointed by the city, the county, the state, however they form, that are members of that community that manage versus just a port authority. I think it's a slightly different, but I believe something specific for managing if that is, but I don't think that's where we're at. I just don't want, there are other avenues of managing that could be better than a port, from my experience.
I agree with that. Just from the basis of an existing public entity to actually go through the Air Force process.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also agree with that. Having worked at port authorities, city authorities, and airport authorities, by far the best operation that you can find, and you can go across the United States and possibly the world, find that an authority is, without any question, the best way to operate it. Sometimes it doesn't fit within the city or the environment that you're working at in any particular place, but the authority is by far the best. And just one more comment I'd like to make. I think we need to go back and remember what the gentleman from Sea-Tac said. His problem is within the next 5 years. We're talking about, listen, there's no question, if you've traveled around the world, you'll see there's rail is working everywhere, but it's not going to solve Sea-Tac's problem within the next 5 years. If you think that you can build an airport, it takes a long time. Look at the Central high-speed rail in California. Look at the cost, and it will eventually, when it opens in another 4 or 5 years, from Modesto to Central Valley. And I don't think there's a lot of people who are going to ride that part. Someday, not in my lifetime, probably not in anybody that's seated at this table, will not see that go from San Francisco to LA.
Yeah. Shameless plug, Yakima will be ready to form.
Just one other comment, because I hear this from some of the board members that they just think we're going to get this consultant on board and all our prayers are going to be answered. And I just want to say, we make a selection, they have to negotiate an agreement, they have to come to a meeting, speak with us, get on board. Like the first meeting we have them at, they're not going to know anything. I mean, they're going to know the basics. But this is going to take some time to get them up to speed. So please don't think we just get a consultant and bang, they're experts and it's over with and done. I think that's unfair expectations to set for whoever comes in and is selected. There's a process to get them on board. And I might be shocked if contracts are signed through consultant and state by the next meeting.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, this is Charlie. I'm confused a little bit, and I just want to have a little bit of clarification. Part of our charter is not to decide what type of airport management structure, or is it? Is that what we're talking about too? Because we just talked about boards, authorities, managers. Is that a topic as well? I'm curious because I didn't think that was what we were after.
I mean, I just was looking back at our statutory charge from the 2023 and then the new 2025 bill, and it's pretty open-ended to make recommendations. I think we've moved. There are no more public commenters. No, right. So we've moved into the set next meeting and adjourn, which is sort of just part of the meeting. So, so Ms. Reardon, to answer your question, right? I think were we to get to that point, then I think the suggestion of what kind of public entity, but I think there's a lot between here and there. And at least as I see it, the consultant, will be helpful. But you're right. I think it's definitely not going to be overnight, and this process should still be driven by the members of the group and what the consultant has said. Facilitating and doing research in between meetings, as opposed to being the driving bus.
Well, and to speak for Mr. Hodgman, I think he was more geared towards navigating the communication or the process of Joint Base Lewis McChord and having an entity
Correct.
that is saying that we would like to do this.
Correct.
We can't do that. So I think it was just bringing that up, which that's so I think that's probably one of the last things that's going to come out of this if it comes out of this. But that's how I took it.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to ask.
Right. I was surprised to get a comment from somebody. Apparently speaking in some official capacity.
Super helpful.
Extremely helpful. Yeah. So I think we should set a date for our next meeting, and then we should talk about what we want to talk about. There were several suggestions already. Let's look at the calendar.
Mr. Chair, are we looking at October or November? Since
I think
we're close to the report.
Third date is back to Tuesday, because I think we did Wednesday this meeting.
Normally, I think what we kind of agreed to before was we would alternate between in-person meetings and hybrid. But I'm kind of thinking that if we actually have a consultant on board by November, perhaps we ought to consider having an in-person meeting with them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And Gary, you also mentioned that we may at least like Boeing Field interested in hosting us.
Yes, I may recall that Anne said that she had some interest both from Boeing Field and Chehalis. So, it's possible we could hold a meeting there in person and invite our new consultant to attend.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment at something that was mentioned earlier. The length of time it's going to take to get this consultant on board, whether we have that signed by the end of November, I think knowing the way that these things go, we'll be very lucky if we can do it and have them available by the end of November. So I would hope we could shoot for having it done by the end of November, and maybe our meeting, and I do know that Boeing Field has offered, yes, that we might do it the first week or the first couple of weeks of December, because I don't think we'll have them on board if we do it much earlier than that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Charlie. I'm jumping in again, and I agree with Oris. I mean, if we have a selection in October, we still have to go through they got to build the scope, they got to negotiate the fee, they have to come to terms, and I doubt that's going to happen by the next meeting.
On a topic, whether it's next meeting or some other time, we're building knowledge, right? We talked about shooters, we talked about rail. I think someone from the FAA to talk about airspace in the greater Puget Sound region would be very, very helpful. That's a pretty substantial constraint that I think would be helpful for this group and for all of the folks online, public, to become aware of. It's almost insurmountable in Western Washington to be a airspace.
So I have that on my list of possibilities, but so what if we shot for, instead of mid-November ahead of Thanksgiving, what if we shot for something like Wednesday, December 3rd?
I thought we were doing, Tuesday to Wednesday.
Oh, Tuesday, the 2nd of,
No, I'm just, because for me, Wednesdays are dicey because I have commission meetings, so there's.
Tuesday,
Tuesday the second.
Tuesday the 2nd.
Yeah.
I think that would give us the best chance of having somebody, if we're going to have somebody, at least we'll be selected and they could sit in the room and participate by then and listen.
Does anyone else have thoughts about Tuesday, December 2nd?
Yes.
I move approval.
Okay. Anyone else online, just, is that particularly good or particularly bad?
You have a location?
So we'll
Um,
we set the date. So let's say Tuesday. I have a motion to approve Tuesday, December 2nd. Is there a second?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we have a date, Tuesday, December 2nd. Now, location. I think the idea of having, if we're shooting, we're trying to have a consultant on board by then, having it in person with them makes sense. And I think then also having it be, if we can take up Boeing Field on their offer, if they're available that date, that's central for any consultant coming from somewhere not already in Seattle. That would make sense. The other thoughts on that? So why don't, since we don't know for certain, why don't we pencil in the idea of taking a Boeing Field on their offer, and I'll have to ask, a follow up with Anne when she gets back on that point.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'm talking to them now, and they said that somebody from the CAWG had asked about hosting it here at Boeing Field, and they responded that they could host. So yes, they can host at Boeing Field.
Okay, great.
And then just as another note, I know that Beta Technologies had their electric plane there last month, and they're looking to come back to Boeing Field for a demonstration in November, December. So I'll try to ask them if they can come around that time, because the CAWG will be there for the electric plane demo.
That was another item on my list, so that's great.
We have a working partner with the guy. I was shooting myself as well. I don't know what each other are works, but Beta Technology is interesting. West Coast.
So who could make an ask about doing the FAA airspace presentation?
I think leave that to Anne to coordinate. If she can't,
Yeah, I think Ann should do that.
if she can't, I don't know what WashDOT can or can't do, but if she can't do it, she can let us know and figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. And then, the 5 items I had are potentially for December: new consultant intro, electric and alternative fuels, aircraft tech, potential electric plane demo, FAA airspace presentation, WashDOT Rail Ports Division presentation.
Probably first quarter of 2026 for that. Just because the state rail plan comes out then.
Okay.
And actually, just for planning purposes, there's 2 different divisions of WashDOT involved in that, because the high-speed rail stuff is handled separately. Federal Rail Freight and Ports, which handles conventional rail.
Chair Norby, I'd like to follow up from the local airports collaborative.
Was that the public commenter?
No, the presentation that was done earlier about how the different small airports potentially can get a system, and it just seems that I'm curious if there is some kind of collaborative research or entity that can actually say, you know, what's the feasibility of doing such a design? Or just
Well,
identifying a group that can do that kind of study.
Maria, are you questioning whether or not some of these airports would be eligible? Or is that your question?
No, I'm not there yet. I was intrigued by the presentation that there are these small airports that can collaborate and take on smaller airplanes and electric planes. And it seems like a long-term vision. And I had asked if there is a coordinated planning group, and the answer was no, not yet. And it seemed that we can give them time to come back to us and say, oh, have you identified some kind of a planning entity? And my guess is that whatever that planning entity would be would need some assistance from the legislature, because our horizon to get our report out is much shorter than that kind of work.
It's going to need some legislative development. I can tell you that we will partner with 5 other airports and Beta Technologies to create a micro electric aviation system at Boeing Field, Penny Field, Friday Harbor, Port Angeles, Chehalis, Yakima. We're all partnered with Beta Technologies and put in a pre-USDOT grant to get 2 charging stations per airport. But it's very much organic. It's from the bottom up. And to really coordinate with all of the Part 139 airports, it's going to need some state level collaboration and assistance. And simply because at the airports we have full-time jobs and we're busier than busy. I've been listening to these 2 guys talk today. We're busier than busy, just like me. So we would need somebody to help us.
Somebody fly now. Somebody fly now.
Yeah, Beta Technologies was out here in Chehalis a week or 2 ago.
That's our airport. 2 weeks ago.
They were choose to? Okay. Yeah, they're fine.
So that sounds like not a presentation that we could put together by December, but something to keep in mind.
Well, I'd say we're in the legislative session, the build-up portion right now. In some of my other roles, we're already working on a bill for something unrelated. But this is the time that if there's an interest that we gain to speak with the legislature, this is when we have to start getting the ground game together, getting the coalition together, and getting your message and finding legislators that want to sponsor that bill. This is now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else right at the moment if we want to try to add to our could be 3 pretty substantial items for the December agenda.
Hey, Mr. Chair, sorry. Boeing Field cannot host on that day. They can do it a different day that week or the next week. They have their tower sighting that day. So the DC people will be in there. They wouldn't have the space. So if there's a different day, they could host it, or the next week, but they cannot host it on that day.
Tuesday, December 9th.
December 9th? Let me ask.
Not the first. I mean, one day, December.
So that's the Thanksgiving is late. That's the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Oh,
The 9th.
9th is better.
Did you say the 9th?
Did the 9th work for any other members that haven't spoken up?
Check it.
Works for me.
Good report. Possibilities.
The airport said yes, that the 9th works for them.
Okay. We'll make that work. Okay.
All right, do I have a motion to reschedule for December 9th?
So moved.
All second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, December 9th. Well, I think maybe what we ought to do is let's keep the 3 items and then we'll flesh out an agenda sooner rather than later with rough times and see if there's something else we want to add to that. because those could be three pretty substantial items. Any other thoughts on our agenda for December? Hearing none.
Yes, so we're doing an RFQ for the consultant, right?
We did an RFQ.
Okay, so
And right.
we don't have the scope yet.
Well, we have a statement of work that went out that the offers responded to. So I think now our task is to review those offers.
So we're in scope and fee.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're going to interview, or we're going to shortlist and then interview. After the short one's selected, then we do a scope of work to match the fees that are available, and then we have a scope of work with fees. That's not going to happen before December.
While their attorneys and WashDOT's attorneys are going to come up with an agreement, I just don't see it.
I guess I was proposing that as we continue to walk on this path and gain knowledge, it may refine our statement of work for ourselves. And it may be worthwhile to have a discussion at the next meeting on new things that we've, the things we want to take off, things that we want to add on.
We've gone down this path, we've submitted it, we've gotten responses. We can't be changing things since it's already out. If we're negotiating scope, I think you can make some tweaks in the scope, but to change things right now, we need to wait, review, and then negotiate with the selected candidate. I just don't think I don't think there's even a mechanism to change anything at this point until we get someone on board and negotiate the scope.
Maybe we're using different terminology, but to me, we would have a contract with a offerer, then we would write some task orders under that contract to ask them to do specific things for us.
Generally, so we're going to get a proposal that tells us about their company and how they can meet the scope of work. Like for the proposal that we put out, we grade them. We shortlist everybody. They get an interview. Someone is selected. They come back with a scope and a fee because you don't negotiate that. So then that's where they come back with the scope and fee. We work on that scope and fee. Then there's an agreement that will get probably by attorneys.
Yeah, Gary, it's a little bit different than your FAA stuff that you've worked on, where you have COTAR and you have a big project, a pot of money that you do task orders under. This one will have a defined scope of work that the consultant will take care of. If we want to change that, then that's going to be after the date. It'll be extra fees or that, but it'll be a defined scope of work with defined dollars.
All right. Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Let's see who's in the tower. Visit 2, 3.
Recording stopped.